I have a key race alert for you now. With 42% of the estimated vote in, incumbent Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock currently leads with 55.3% of the vote over Republican Herschel Walker with 44.7% of the vote. Warnock ahead roughly 155,000 votes as of now, but still more than half of the vote has yet to come in. Let's remember what this is all about, the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. Democrats currently have 50 seats, including one pickup that was in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Republicans have 49 seats. One seat remains outstanding. That is this seat in Georgia, which will determine the balance of power. Let's go to Jeff Zeleny, who's at Herschel Walker's campaign headquarters right now in Atlanta. Jeff, what are you hearing from Republicans about the vote, particularly about these pre-election ballots, early vote?
Well, Jake, I can tell you there is strong optimism about the Election Day vote, but even Herschel Walker advisors and supporters know that that will not be enough alone to defeat Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock. I just spoke to a top Republican official here in Georgia who had these really stark words about the Republican Party's view of early voting. This official tells me this: if Republicans want to start winning here, we've got to get over the suspicion of early voting. Of course, no place more than Georgia has been really awash in these suspicions of early voting and Election Day shenanigans, et cetera, really since the November 2020 election because of former President Donald Trump. But again and again, after election after election, elections that have been run very smoothly, these suspicions remain. So even though the Walker campaign worked very aggressively to try and get out this early vote, Herschel Walker did ads on this, other Republican officials did as well, there is a sense that the early vote still has a dramatic benefit for the Democratic Party. So Republicans here believe that they must do much better in the early voting going forward. Of course, they can't change that in this race. As for this race, inside the strategy rooms here, I'm told that aides are looking over results coming in from these rural Georgia counties. That's where they know that they have to make up some of the difference here from the urban counties. And Jake, there is not the bold optimism that there was a month ago on election night in November. We're at the College Football Hall of Fame. You can see behind me here, of course, this has been the basis of the Walker campaign, his football career, of course, at the University of Georgia, which has coincided with the Georgia Bulldogs' a very successful season so far this year. But this official tells me there is a path to make it a race, but that's as far as the optimism here goes. Jake?
All right, Jeff Zeleny, thanks so much. Let's go to Caitlin Collins now, who has strong feelings about the University of Georgia football team herself. She's on the ground in Atlanta. And Caitlin, you've been talking to the Republican governor, Brian Kemp, who has been trying to help Herschel Walker in this runoff. What are you hearing from Kemp's camp?
Yeah, I think Jeff Zeleny said that on purpose. He knew I was standing here. But it's fascinating what Jeff said about the early voting and what he's hearing from Republican officials on that. Because, Jake, actually, when I was in Georgia in recent weeks interviewing Governor Kemp, I asked him about those Republican efforts from the Attorney General here, Republican officials in the state who pushed back on that attempt by Warnock to get that extra day of early voting, that Saturday, remember, after Thanksgiving. He actually disagreed with that. He said he thought that that was a distraction to push back against that. He said that there should have been early voting allowed on that day. We'll see if that is actually going to be something that affects the numbers that we see tonight when we're measuring what the early vote looks like compared to those votes today. And that is a message that came from Kemp. Obviously, he pushed a very different message than Walker did on the campaign trail in the general election. They were hoping, some Republicans, that in these last 4 weeks that Walker's message would look a lot more like Kemp's did, given the fact that Kemp got more votes than Walker did in every single county in the state of Georgia in that election, Jake. And remember, he was someone that we had been speaking to. He was running on issues like inflation. He was talking about what he believed the Biden agenda was happening, what it was doing in Washington, and how he wanted to push back against that. It was a very different message than what you were hearing from Walker, who was focusing instead on culture wars and whatnot. And so that is something that they tried to get Walker to shift his message to look more like Kemp's in these last few weeks. That is not necessarily an effort that was Republicans in this state. And when you talk to voters who were going to the ballot box today, casting their vote between Herschel Walker and Warnock. They noted that Walker didn't really adjust that message, but they are looking at what Kemp was looking at, which is it a Republican that you're voting for, or is it a Democrat? And that is really so much of the effort here. And so the big question is whether or not Walker made a mistake in not looking more like Kemp's campaign in those final days, or if Kemp's efforts to help him could actually boost him given his popularity in the state.
All right, Caitlin Collins with the Kemp campaign in Atlanta. Thanks so much. Or the Kemp headquarters,
Over to the Republican.
Let's say right now we're going to be joined by a key election official right now, the Chief Operating Officer at the Georgia Secretary of State's office, Gabriel Sterling, who many of you probably got familiar with during the 2020 election and the 2021 runoff. Gabe, good to see you again. Let's first talk about the pace of the vote counting. When do you think we'll know the winner? Will it be tonight?
Again, and the voters vote for a reason because we have no idea what they do in those booths. And until the ballots all come in, we don't really know. What I do know right now is we have a lot of the big county early votes in and absentee votes in, places like from Gwinnett and Fulton, big Republican counties like Cherokee. So we're getting the votes in at a pretty quick pace. We expect once we get to about the 2.5 million mark, it's probably going to slow down some. And it really is dependent on what is out and how the turnout was today. But one thing I do know is we have record turnout today, record turnout in the early voting, record usage of absentee ballots. So the people of Georgia were very excited to vote. And one of the things I was very proud of and happy with all of our voters, nobody was discouraged from voting. Nobody said, I feel like my side's already going to win, or I feel like my side's already going to lose. Everybody in Georgia wanted to get out and vote.
So you had record early voting in total, or just day-to-day early record early voting?
No, we had record early voting. We had record early voting for a midterm runoff, like blue doors on that. We nearly had the number. Actually, we had more people vote early in the midterm runoff than voted in the entire midterm runoff 4 years ago.
Oh, wow. Now, you said that it also looks like Georgia in-person voting today, in-person voting, probably beat the Election Day vote from November. Where was that? Was it all across the state in any specific counties?
Here's the frustrating thing for all the political consultants and pundits out there is it's everywhere. There is no dichotomy between the red counties and the blue counties. So there's no good way to say who's winning and who's losing on this day, which is why I have to actually go through this torturous thing of actually counting the votes.
Do you know approximately how many total ballots were cast in this runoff election, both the early vote and in-person Election Day vote?
With the numbers we have, we're looking at close to 3.3 million, which is really much more than any of the pundits or consultants expected. And even us as elections professionals, this is really exceeding that turnout because we're at nearly probably 75 to 80% of the entire turnout for the November election, which is really huge.
Gabe Sterling, John King, appreciate your time. I know it's a really busy night. So you mentioned you have your early votes. We have the Election Day vote, and you say you see no significant difference between blue counties or red counties or different areas of the states in the drop-off. So what about in this short turnaround, because you only have 1 month, for people who requested an absentee ballot in the mail, if it's really close and those last ballots matter, when will we know? Well, the reality of it is there's a few specific things we have in the law. We have ballots that came in today. They had to be in by 7 o'clock today, except in one county where a judge ordered, and that was Cobb County, that can be in by Friday. And then we have the 2 other buckets of votes. So they're provisionals that can be verified by Friday, and then the overseas and military ballots. There's about 3,800 of those, I think, and those can be, if they're postmarked by today, can get here by Friday. So those would give us those numbers. I'm not saying it's going to be that close, but we always try to keep an eye on these things so we can be prepared for whatever comes at us.
So theoretically, if it is close, we might be waiting until Friday or Saturday. But we don't know it's going to be that close. But that, as a theoretical idea, that's possible.
Scarily, I don't want to put that into the universe, but sure, it's possible.
We have had election week in America before, Jake.
Oh, many times.
We have had this.
Many times.
Gabe, you were talking about, it's the magic of counting the votes, and it's the gift of democracy that we get to count the votes. I know you view it that way, especially as someone who has come under unfair attacks over the last several years. As someone who knows the state so well, when you have something like this, surprisingly high turnout, is there a county or two that you just use as your own
You know, I look at every state and there's a swing county here, a swing county there. There are quirky counties in some states. Do you have a couple in Georgia that you watch just as your own bellwethers?
I'd probably look at Fayette right now as something that could change direction. The thing about most of our counties is they are pretty red or pretty blue. There's very few that are kind of a mixed bag. But you have what I call the sort of the diode counties, which is Augusta, which is Richmond, which is pretty Democratic, but it has a suburban Columbia that's pretty Republican. A Bibb that's pretty Democratic, that has Houston south of it that's pretty Republican. You look at how those kind of turn out together, and that can give you some pretty good bellwethers to look at. One other thing, when you were talking to Caitlin earlier, you said she had strong feelings about the University of Georgia Bulldogs. I do too. I feel really good about our chances coming up in December versus Ohio State, but I don't want to jinx it. I feel really good about our chances.
I kept it neutral. I didn't say how she felt about the University of Georgia, but you know. I think viewers are familiar with her Alabama ties. Gabe Sterling, good luck tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate everything you do there in Georgia and the fight for voter integrity and to defeat the lies and conspiracy theories. Thank you so much.
If I can say one more thing on that front, then, whoever loses needs to concede, and whoever wins needs to realize that they represent everybody, not just the people who voted for them. That's how you restore faith in the American system.
All right, I'm into that. The Warnock-Walker Senate race could potentially tighten at any moment as more votes come in. Will this be a nail-biter? Stay with us to find out. Stay with us.
Well, the prison pop 30. I want to check in with CNN's Phil Mattingly, who is at the White House. Phil, President Biden has a considerable stake in the outcome tonight. What is he hearing about the state of play in Georgia?
You know, Anderson, this is a very different night than the midterm election night on November 8th. The president is not at the White House. He is not sitting with aides up in the residence watching the votes come in. Instead, he's actually on Air Force One on the way back from Arizona, where he spent the day talking about his administration's agenda items, clear wins that they felt they had in the first 2 years. However, when the president wrapped up his final meeting, sources say he was immediately briefed on the state of play on the ground in Georgia. Obviously, White House officials keeping a very close eye on that early vote heading into today, and on the day keeping a close eye on what has been a very significant election day vote as well, as they try and figure out how this is all going to land. But where the president actually was today is instructive about where White House officials see things at this moment in time. They feel like they overperformed in the midterm elections, in large part because they feel the president's message, even a message that some Democrats criticized at times, actually ended up resonating. In the post-midterm election travel, kind of gives a window into that. The president going to Michigan. He was only there once before the midterm elections, where Democrats did very well, holding on to a governor's seat, doing well in House races as well. Anderson, we talk about how the president was not necessarily invited to Georgia to help campaign for Raphael Warnock, either before the midterm elections or in the runoff. He certainly wasn't invited to Arizona either. However, Democrats won the governor's race. Democrats held on to the Senate seat as well there. Where the president has gone in the wake of the midterm elections has underscored the feeling inside the White House that there is a palpable sense of success coming off those midterm elections, success that may transfer over into a decision the president is still weighing with his family members expected to make in the coming weeks about whether or not to seek re-election in 2024. One thing I would note, critical states for Biden's win in 2020, Michigan, Arizona, and most certainly Georgia. Those states will all be critical in 2024 as well. So you noted the stakes the president has here, keeping a very close eye on Air Force One about what's happening in this race in Georgia.
Phil, thanks very much. From the White House, now the stakes for the former president, Donald Trump. Kristen Holmes is digging on that. What's the thinking inside Trump world as this runoff unfolds?
Well, Anderson, former President Trump needs a win, and his entire team knows that. He's coming off of midterm results in which most of the candidates that he endorsed either fizzled or flopped. He had a lackluster campaign announcement where several of his aides, allies, and advisors are all concerned whether or not his heart is actually in a 2024 run. And they really believe that they need this win, that this will actually stop the momentum against Trump. As we have seen, a number of Republicans continue to come out. They are speaking out against Trump. They are saying that they would be willing to take him on in 2024. We have heard some of the biggest donors say that they will not vote for Donald Trump. They will not support Donald Trump. It is time to move on from the former president. So they need this win. But they are keenly aware that if Walker loses, Donald Trump will be blamed. He didn't just endorse Walker. He handpicked him. He recruited him. This was the candidate that he wanted. And they know that Trump will be blamed for this. So all to keep in mind here, they are hoping for a win tonight in Georgia.
Kristen, Appreciate it. We'll check back in with you here with the team in New York. Listen, I mean, would a win for Walker have any energizing effect on the Trump campaign?
No, I mean, it would be probably one high note in a very, very no good, terrible few weeks for the former president. Like, just to put a finer point on Kristen's reporting there, he made his announcement. It fell very flat. It was written with conspiracy theories, just did not have the momentum that 2016 or even 2020 did when he announced. Then he's now had this New York jury, voting for convicting the Trump organization. He's had his former counsel testify in the grand jury. He's had the special master ruled against. He's having legal failings after legal failings. On top of that, the midterm flop that he cost Republicans. It's a bad time to be Donald Trump. It's probably the most weakened he's been since he came down the escalator.
Lieutenant Governor, I mean, you've been very outspoken on, saying that the Republican Party needs to break its addiction to the former president.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle of addiction, right? We were trying to figure out, all the stresses and strains that he's created, all the headwinds he's created. As we talked about earlier, if you're a candidate, the last person you want is Donald Trump, if you're a Republican, to be traveling around with you. And I think we're getting there. The unfortunate part is Donald Trump's given a hall pass to the Democrats. He's been the shiny object that's captivated the middle's attention away from Joe Biden and really the direction, the policy directions that really are unexplainable, even by most of the folks on the left.
I think the question really is going to come down to, is a connection with Donald Trump now a political liability for some Republicans? Because when it's about your own self-interest and your own reelection and your party and your future and your life, and if you have a strong connection with Donald Trump and you think that's going to hurt you, then you just might maybe come out and say that anybody who dines with deranged Nazi lovers should be disqualified from being president of the United States.
Ben, you look skeptical.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that could happen. What I do know is this. Tonight is about Georgia, and tonight is about Trump picking somebody who, frankly, used to be a hero. His name, Herschel Walker, used to mean inspiration. Now it means insult. He's an insult to the black community. And what you may see tonight is people coming out not just to vote in favor of a senator that they love, but just to vote against Donald Trump picking somebody like this and throwing this person at the voters in Georgia like, well, you'll just pick anybody who's black. His judgment, Trump's judgment tonight is going to be, I think, called into question by a lot of people. And I think that when you have a situation where it's obvious that Trump he was a little bit too clever by half. Mm-hmm. I know I'm going to put a black guy against a black guy, but the guy that he picked was the wrong black guy.
So you think it's insulting?
I think it's
absolutely
insulting. It's the judgment around the kinds of people you want to run for office, this addiction to celebrity culture.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I mean, look, this is one of the things about Republicans over the years. We don't have any celebrities much. There's a handful of folks. We have Duncan, and that's about it. But when somebody pops up and they're famous, and all of a sudden it's like, is this person a Republican? And people start to elevate them beyond potentially what they're capable of. Look what's happened with Kanye West. Mm-hmm. And Herschel Walker, I think, obviously got the nomination because not just because Trump picked him, but he legitimately a legend. But that doesn't necessarily make you the kind of person people want to put in the Senate. Now, we're still counting votes tonight. We'll see what happens. But one of the things coming out of the midterm for me as a Republican is, I was talking to a Republican about this the other night, and he said, I think people just want normal folks who have good character. And that doesn't mean you have to pick every celebrity out there and elevate them beyond what they're capable of.
But that's a part of the Trump brand.
I don't want to cut out celebrities from being able to run for office, but I think that if you are Herschel Walker, you are an insult to the black voters of Georgia. And honestly, I'm not a Republican, but it would be an insult to me as a Republican to think that this is the type of person that I actually want to send to the United States Senate. I also think, though, for Trump, when you look at his liability, I think it's a difference between primary and general. If you can get through your primary without, let's talk about 2024, without Trump for some of the Senate races endorsing you, but you're in a close race, I'm in the business of building coalitions. Maybe you try and pull some of those Trump voters and those independents, but not have Trump be your leading force. I think that's what Walker is trying to do tonight. I think it's too little too late because he was selected by Trump.
Yeah, right. That's Glenn Youngkin, maybe. That's
exactly. And you guys will remember in 2014 when the Senate race was going on in Georgia, Herschel Walker emerged as a great surrogate for a credible Republican candidate. It's not like there isn't a place for celebrities who want to get into politics. You have no business being in the world's greatest deliberative body if you can't name basic policy positions, if you are clearly unclear on where you stand on something like the abortion issue, which is one of the most important issues facing our country.
What do you make of Walker as a candidate?
Well, look, I've been very vocal about this, and not because I don't want Republicans to have majorities. I just have, the candidate quality does matter. And I think long-term, this actually is a benefit for Republicans if we take this as a medicine, and we pivot at this point, and we go find folks that can really lead. And Gloria, I want to go back to something that you said. You know, at this point, I think Republicans want the air cover of a real leader. They want somebody to step up in 24 that is actually somebody they can attach their brand to, distance themselves from Donald Trump, and once again be a conservative. You know, Donald Trump's confused everybody, maybe even brainwashed the conservative base to think that conservatism is somehow angryism. It's not angry. It's a very articulate way to make smaller government, safer borders, foreign policy that matters. Those are things that conservatives want again.
The good thing that's going on here and the danger for Democrats is you guys are now having to look under your own hood, and you're asking tough questions. Right now, Democrats are not. Like if we win tonight, you got a lot of triumphalism on our side. But there's this counter scenario where if you didn't have that abortion decision come down, if Trump hadn't gotten in there and picked a bunch of people that couldn't win, we'd be the ones crying, and we'd be trying to make our party better. So right now, you guys are in a better position because you're being forced to rethink. We got to rethink as well.
I just want to point out we're about 53% of the vote counted in Georgia, 4 points ahead. Raphael Warnock is holding a slim lead as the race has been tightening. Stay with us. See what happens when the next batch of votes is reported. We'll be right back.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to and relieve. It's time to
big lead. We're beginning now. This is votes came in.
Even more now with 50 right now. Only ahead by 40. Republican with 40 vote in. Look,
North Carolina. It's time to get out in front of eczema. Ask your doctor about once daily Sabinco.
I'm Miguel Marquez in Moore County, North Carolina, and this is CNN.
we have a key race alert for you now, and with 54% of the estimated vote in, look how tight it is getting. Incumbent Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock with 51.2% of the vote over Herschel Walker, the Republican, with 48.8% of the vote. It is about a 3-point race. Raphael Warnock, the senator, incumbent Democratic senator, is only ahead by 43,000 plus votes right now. And John King, we were saying this at the early part of the night when Warnock was up so significantly that it was going to tighten even more. Now with 55% in, he's up 43,000 votes, and it's shrinking.
A little more than 2 points. It was 3 points when you started. As you were coming over, more votes came in. So it's a little more than a 2-point race right now, which is one. Georgia's a very competitive state. This is a very competitive race. This is what we expected. The early vote, Senator Warnock took a big lead. We're beginning now. This is still mostly what you're seeing, early vote. But we're beginning now. We're somewhere around 12, 13, 14% of what you see in the total vote count is Election Day vote. And that number's changing as I'm speaking because these counties, especially these smaller rural counties, start counting their votes. And so is Herschel Walker running it up? In places like Coffee County, not a ton of votes there, right? 6,000 votes there, but 69, 70%. That's what he needs to do in this swath of red that you see, the smaller rural counties. Run it up on Election Day to offset what you're seeing up here. And let's just wander through some of these. When we were talking to Gabe Sterling, he mentioned Fayette County as one of his favorite sort of swing counties or bellwether counties to watch. At the moment, we're about half of the vote counted here. Senator Warnock is at 59%. This county, Herschel Walker carried a month ago. Now, again, what we're seeing here now, this is a month ago. This is predominantly early vote, so we'll see if it holds up. But just one of the places on the map you look at, because they can swing sometime in close elections. Here's another one for me. Over here at Jefferson County, this is a tiny county. This is a really small county population-wise. Why do I like to look at this? Because you have Augusta in the suburbs, then you come out here. Warnock carried this a month ago, but in the governor's race, Brian Kemp narrowly carried this county. So just one of the small places that swings back and forth that you look to in a map in a close race to see. How did Warnock do? To look for clues. Sorry, let me come back. How did Warnock do a month ago?
A month ago, how did Warnock do?
Warnock carried that one just barely.
It's barely.
A very competitive. So you look, he gets just over 50 in the governor's race. the governor, Republican, gets just over 50. So this was the ultimate of the swing counties, if you will.
It is a bellwether. That's a real bellwether, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a tiny population center, but it's just a place you look at because it swings back and forth. So where are we now? Make sure I'm in the right place. Yes. 37, it was 40, it just went down even more. You have a 2-point race now as you watch the votes come in. And that's just the count. We're just getting more and more of the counts as you come around. So let's see where we are in the more populated areas. Fulton County is the best. We think, it's an estimate, 55% of the vote there. Warnock above 80%. That's where you need to be. That's where you need to be if you're in the Fulton County, the biggest Democratic area. You move over to Cobb County, 67%. But look at that. That's a low number. This is the early vote that came in early, and it has been pretty stuck there as we wait for more votes for Cobb County. Douglas County up to about 84%. This needs to be big for the Democrats. And you just do the loop around. This will get you back to Fulton. Then you come up to Gwinnett here and DeKalb here, and you're just looking at the margins. The margins, as we speak, are in the ballpark of where Senator Warnock would need them to be at the end of the night. The challenge is we're not at the end of the night. And if you're in the Walker campaign, knowing that you're beginning to get more of the election day vote, but this is still disproportionately early vote, you're happy with that because you're counting on today. Now, that's what they were counting on. What we don't know, and what will take another couple hours to sort out, is the Warnock campaign also was well aware. A smaller period of early voting, a shorter period to get mail ballots and turn them around. A lot of people say they requested mail ballots and they either came late or didn't get them. Was the Warnock campaign successful of turning its vote out today? And we'll see that when we start to get the day of vote up in the Atlanta suburbs, in Augusta, in Columbus, down here in Savannah, where you have traditionally Democratic areas. That will be the test of the next couple hours as we get more of the election day vote. Was the Warnock campaign more competitive than the Walker campaign wanted it to be today? And that's the fascinating part. That is a race. We have a ways to go.
What can you tell me in terms of where are we waiting for the most outstanding vote as of now?
Sure. Well, let's take a look now, again, as you watch. So the bigger the circle is you're waiting for more. The color is who's leading in that area right now. No guarantee those leads stay. But you see most of the vote is up here in Atlanta and the suburbs around it. And at the moment, Senator Warnock is leading in those areas. So if you're just looking at that and you're a Democrat, you think, okay, most of the outstanding vote is here and we're leading. That's a source of optimism. I will say I understand that, but you're leading because they've counted most of the early votes so far. Right. We have to see what happens in the election day vote. The Republicans believe they will win, and overwhelmingly so, in the election day vote. We will see if they are right. That's what they need. They know they need to win that because of the early vote. But you see these pockets up here. Again, we talked earlier about Atlanta and the suburbs, and then you get up more to the ex-urban areas. That's where we are up here. These red circles right north of Atlanta, that's where we are here. More Democratic votes out here. And still, there's small circles in these small red counties, but as we've learned, they can add up. So if you come in and you turn that off and you look at where we are again, most of this state is going to be red.
Just narrowed again, 31,000 votes. Warnock only up 31,000 votes with 57% of the estimated vote reporting.
So this is where we go. And we're going to have a couple hours of this. You're going to get, a couple hundred votes here, a couple thousand votes there, and you watch it all play out. And in a short period of time, I know this is what he's working on with his team all night, David Chelling will be able to tell us, as the percentage of the key thing is what happens to the lead as the percentage of the election day vote starts to catch up. Right, to catch up to where
that's happening right now.
Right, to where you have the early vote. Most of what we're seeing here is the early vote, but as we've been having a conversation, I said it was around 12 or 13% of what we were seeing is election day vote. I am certain in the couple of minutes we've been talking, even that percentage has gone up, which is why, Walker's getting closer. The question is, is it enough?
And as you recounted for us a month ago, it started with a Warnock lead, and then Walker took lead, and then they went back and forth. They seesawed back and forth until ultimately Warnock ended the night with a slight lead over Walker. We don't know what's going to happen. I would not be surprised if we had the seesaw again tonight, back and forth, back and forth. Only 29,219 votes ahead right now with 58% estimated in right now. It's all up to the vote counters. Now, we're standing by for updates from the key counties that will decide the Senate runoff as it gets tighter and tighter and tighter. More results after this quick break. Stay with us. Look at this key race alert with 59% of the estimated vote in. It is a 0.2% race. 0.2%. Raphael Warnock with, now it's only a 4,600 vote lead over Republican Herschel Walker. Warnock with 50.1% of the vote. Walker with 49.9% of the vote. As more votes come in, the race is narrowing and narrowing and narrowing. Let's go to Zeleny, who is at Herschel Walker's headquarters. Jeff, Is the Walker campaign rejoicing? Look, Walker just took the lead, I'm told, on the vote count as it's coming in. Is the Walker campaign rejoicing there?
Absolutely, Jake. You can hear some of the crowd behind me cheering. They're actually singing along to a Garth Brooks song, Friends in Low Places, but they also are feeling very optimistic about where they are in this moment, particularly as it depends on early or election day voting, I should say. But that skepticism remains about the early vote. That is what one of the questions here is. Is there enough election day turnout to overcome what they believe is a big Warnock advantage in early voting? But this is exactly why Herschel Walker has been traveling around the state, campaigning in football themes, and we're here in the College Football Hall of Fame. He's been trying to urge people to get off the sidelines and come out and vote because they were anticipating a close race. But Jake, the campaign strategists are perhaps less optimistic to some degree than some of these supporters, because they are also looking at some of these other numbers and they are wondering if they have hit some of their targets in some of the rural areas. So as John was just saying earlier, we are going to watch this go back and forth, just inch up by vote by vote by vote. There's a lot more votes to be counted out there. So yes, this is a party here tonight, much more so than many supporters thought. But again, it's far too early to call it a victory party.
Well, before I go to Eva McCann in Warnock headquarters, let's just get you up to speed at home on the vote right now, because with 61% of the vote in, Herschel Walker has taken the lead. He's up by 0.8 percentage points, 18,721 votes. Republican Herschel Walker in the lead right now, 50.4% of the vote, with Democratic incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock with 49.6% of the vote. And now Walker is up 20,000 votes, and it is a 1-point race. Let's go to Eva McCann at Warnock headquarters. And Eva, I'm giving on the screen behind you that all the voters there are watching. I'm giving them bad news that their candidate is now trailing.
Well, despite that, Jake, I would describe the mood here as still pretty upbeat. I think that the campaign has always said that they knew that this race is going to be incredibly close. Listen, a trio of faith leaders just left the stage. Of all different faiths, and they talked about how this room tonight was a celebration of the New South, a celebration of diversity. Senator Warnock made his faith really central to his argument for re-election, arguing that he is a pastor in the Senate, not just a senator who happens to be a pastor, and arguing that his work in Washington is an extension of his lifelong work in public service. So I think the campaign feels as though it is arguments that, like this one, that made him appealing enough to a wide enough swath of the electorate for him to be successful tonight. So that is the mood on the ground here, Jake. Yes, Walker has pulled ahead, but still very much lively in here this evening.
All right, Eva McCann at Raphael Warnock, Senator Warnock's campaign headquarters. Currently, with the vote in, 61% of it in, estimated, Warnock trails Republican Herschel Walker by 1 percentage point. Walker 21,439 votes ahead. And John, you and I talked about this, how it was quite possible that we would see a repeat of what happened a month ago. Warnock with the early lead, then the vote gets closer, and Walker takes the lead. It could go back and forth.
Right, and so we're seeing, again, essentially what we saw 1 month ago. Once we have a decent proportion of the election day vote, which we now have a much higher percentage in, you get the seesaw. Because, red county reports, Walker jumps ahead. Then one of these big blue county reports more votes, and so we have this. We're in the seesaw phase now, 61% of the estimated votes. So keep an eye on that as it goes up, and then watch this as it switches. So one of the things you're looking at, number one, you asked this before, it's just worth showing every time, is where do we think the votes are still outstanding, right? The bigger the circle is the larger pool of votes still out. So you see these biggest circles in Atlanta and the suburbs right around it, and you see the blue. That means there's a lot of votes outstanding there that we're still waiting to be counted, and at the moment, the Democrat is leading in these places. No guarantee it holds up that way, but if you're in the Warnock campaign, you say, okay, we've fallen behind, we're 33,000 votes down, there are hundreds of thousands of votes. Hundreds of thousands of votes in here. And you're looking at Columbus and you're looking at Savannah and you're saying, okay, if you're in the Walker campaign, you see these exurban areas and you say, we still have some votes out there too. The question, Jeff Zeleny was just raising a great point, and we can't answer it completely yet because a lot of these places are still counting votes, but something to watch as we go through the night. So these smaller rural counties, right? You pick a county here. They're at 67%. You see the percentage at 65%, but Walker needs raw math, right? You need raw numbers. These are not big counties, but you need every vote you can get here to offset Atlanta and the
Right,
suburbs.
and it's such a small county,
Right.
it's only 1,300 votes.
Right. So 2,900 votes, almost 3,000 votes right now. Let's just go back a month ago. It was more than 5,000 votes, right? So when we get the remaining, we're not done yet here. We're only at 67%. Is it enough to get close, right? You're not going to match a month ago. The turnout's probably down a little bit everywhere. The question is, can you get close, right, in these small rural counties? Let's just move over here to Hart County. We're at 95% here in the runoff, right? 77%, that's impressive. That's what you need to do. But the raw number, 7,500, let's just see. That's where we are today. A month ago, it was 7,900. So 400 vote difference there, not as bad, but a little bit of a drop. The question is, if you get a little bit of a drop in dozens of these, because there are dozens of them, these small rural counties, that is the question. What, you know, does it drop you enough? Because now, as you look right there, let's come back to where we are today. Walker had shy of 36,000 votes, but we still have a ton. I just want to walk around the percentages around here.
Okay.
Okay, Cobb County, again.
Only 24% in.
It's the third largest county in the state, so there are a ton of votes here. 55% by far the largest county in the state, ton of votes here. This is the second largest county in the state, 54% here. You move down here, you're at the fourth largest county in the state, DeKalb. We're only at 5%. So we need to see.
There are a ton of Democratic
votes
here.
We need to see much higher percentages here before we can start, into the nitty-gritty. But if you're the Walker campaign, you'd rather be ahead than behind.
Right.
But you know that most of the outstanding votes are right there, and you know that in this election, a month ago, in the governor's race, and in the presidential race, that area is blue.
And when you do the outstanding vote,
let me come back to the right race first. So we look at on the right race, come back to the runoff here. We come down to the outstanding vote. This is what we're still waiting for votes.
So one of the points I wanted to make is this, because it's geographically so compressed, it's almost kind of misleading. There are so many big blue dots here,
right,
that it almost looks as though it's like just one, when it's actually just there are 5 or 6.
It won't go all the way out. Excuse me for turning my back, but you can stretch it out some to show you. Yeah, that's those different counties.
1,
right?
2, 3, 4.
That's Fulton County, DeKalb County, Cobb County, Gwinnett County, Clayton County below it, Henry County
there. If they were spread out, it would look
County
more.
There. Right.
I'm just saying, like, it's not over for Warnock.
No.
There's still a lot of votes to count.
Yeah, there's still probably, Gabe said he thought it would be, Gabe Sterling said it would be over 3 million. So we got a million, maybe.
We got a million votes left.
Maybe 1.5 million votes left to count.
All right, but it's a nail biter, Dana Bash.
It sure is, Jake, and we're back here with our friends and reporters. Jamie, nice to see you. Welcome.
Hi.
We've been talking to our sources as we've been watching John and Jake at the wall. What are you hearing from yours?
So I was actually laughing when John said the seesaw, because just minutes before Herschel Walker pulled ahead, a source on the Walker campaign texted me that he was pessimistic about how they were doing. And said, quote, "We aren't hitting the rural numbers, and Warnock is overperforming in metro areas." So we don't know. It's, this goes back to what we've been saying all day. Let's wait and count it. But I will say, I spoke to sources on Herschel Walker's campaign last night. They were not optimistic about what was happening today, but then you see him pull ahead. Maybe that.
I remember they're very much focused on some of what John was showing at the wall, which is the northern parts of Atlanta, about getting votes out in a very big way there. That's what they're focused on, to balance out other parts where Raphael Warnock is doing quite well, the way he did in November.
Yeah, I mean, if they're looking at where the results are right now, a lot of these red counties are almost tapped out. They've mostly come in, and Walker is leading, but perhaps not by as much as he needs to in order to win. Remember, we came into this runoff, and he was already behind Raphael Warnock, so he needs to really overperform in order to get there. And I think that we really do have to say, like, let's just hit pause on this for a second, because as John and Jake just walked through, the votes, the huge buckets of votes are still very much outstanding, and that's why this early lead that Herschel Walker has taken in the moment is not necessarily going to be something that is a relief to a lot of Republicans because they're looking at all those other red, that sea of red. A lot of those counties are already 95% in.
Yeah, I mean, Republicans that I'm messaging with similarly are suggesting that, this is too early. It's we can't get excited. Yeah, it's good that Walker's up in their view, but there is still some counties that Herschel Walker has not performed as well as he did last month. There's a ton of vote left around the Atlanta area as well. So this result can certainly change. But if Walker does pull off a win here, it would be a very significant upset because the view among the Republican establishment and everybody down in Georgia who's following this race is they thought that Walker had very little chance of pulling this off. This would be a huge shot in the arm for Republicans if you were to pull off this upset, even though it doesn't change the balance of power in the Senate. But nevertheless, as the Republicans acknowledge here, there's a lot more vote to count.
Yeah, a lot more vote to count. But the fact that it is that Republicans are seeing, again, this is early. We're not even close to done covering and counting the vote. But the fact that they have that image on the screen right now is giving them a glimmer of hope. And despite the reality and the realistic numbers that they're seeing in the war rooms that they're texting us from.
Yeah, and look, it's a tough thing for Republicans to be counting on overperforming in the suburbs in this kind of environment. Let's be honest. I mean, the issue for a Herschel Walker right now is that these suburban voters, these suburban collar counties around Atlanta are more diverse, they are younger, they are highly educated, and those are not his voters. So it's a little bit of hope, a lot of hope perhaps, that in those places he might overperform, and that's why I think we're seeing.
And I think it's also significant, the voter turnout here in a runoff. Typically, you see a significant drop-off, but what we heard from Gabriel Sterling, it's high, 3.3 million voters.
Of what it was. And isn't that amazing? These voters in Georgia have voted on this race. Let's just look at Republicans. This is the fourth time because they voted in the primary, and then they voted four times. Then voted in the general election. And then third time. And now they're voting in the runoff. And by the way, this happened last year. This happened, 2 years before that. Voters in Georgia it's almost as if they have accepted and embraced the idea that they are the epicenter of the political universe that's kind of balancing the parties and even balancing democracy right now.
I think it's actually nothing short of extraordinary from the Herschel Walker campaign's point of view, because last night they did not expect to have the kind of turnout that happened today. And part of it was really because that Senate seat, that was a rallying cry for them. And once this was no longer part of the Senate, put aside the fact that there have been a lot of negatives for Herschel Walker, that, they had issues with Trump not wanting him to come in. I mean, it has not been a good close, but they really thought that without the rallying cry of taking the Senate, they were simply not going to see the kind of turnout.
And this is such a highly engaged electorate.
Exactly.
That's just given, you can't avoid this race in this state. They are just bombarded with ads. They have been for months and months and months. And it doesn't, even though it was a runoff election, is the only election on the ballot, most voters know what's going on here. They're very in tune with what's happening.
All right, everybody stand by. Herschel Walker, as you see there on the screen, taking a very slim lead in the Georgia Senate runoff. We're going to see if the race swings back to Raphael Warnock's favor as the vote counters scramble to process and report more results. A lot of suspense right now. Stay with us.
And the key race alert, Raphael Warnock, the Democratic incumbent senator, has pulled ahead with 72% of the vote in. Senator Warnock has 50.4% of the vote. Herschel Walker, the Republican, with 49.6% of the vote. That is a lead for Warnock of 0.8% of the vote, roughly 19,000 votes. A reminder here that this is all about the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. Democrats currently have 50 U.S. Senate seats, including a pickup from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Republicans have 49 seats. They are hoping to win this one last remaining seat in Georgia, needed to control 51. Let's go back to Eva McCann at Warnock headquarters with the reaction with the race swinging back to a Warnock lead. And Eva McKend, I see myself giving the voters their good news. This is going to be, perhaps it's going to seesaw all night, we don't know, but at least now, for the time being, it is seesawed back to Warnock.
Yes, Jake, you can hear loud cheers in this room. Democrats telling me that they were looking at places like DeKalb County, but important to keep in mind that much of metro Atlanta area is still outstanding. But listen, this is an area where the campaign really invested in terms of time. Senator Warnock spent a great deal of time in the metro Atlanta region, really speaking to base voters. On his last day on the campaign trail, that's where he was, speaking to black voters, speaking to college students, speaking to union workers in metro Atlanta. So it seems to be paying off for now, that energized the base, and they are coming out in a big way. But he also campaigned in heavily red areas as well. So if he can run up the numbers in those areas, as well as solidify support in these blue areas, I think is what the campaign is looking for tonight.
All right, Eva McKend, thank you so much. And I'm here with John King at the Magic Well. 73% of the vote in, estimated, and Raphael Warnock, the incumbent Democratic senator, up 1 full percentage point, 23,427 votes as of right now. John King.
Keep an eye on it because it'll change as we speak. That's the magic of election night votes coming in. But we mentioned the seesaw last time you were here. Herschel Walker had a modest lead. Now Senator Warnock has a modest lead. But again, you make a key point. Keep an eye on that. Still a long way to go. Estimated around 73%. So we got a quarter, a little more of that vote still to count. But as you watch the rest of the map fill in, this is what they're doing in the campaign war rooms. They're saying, okay, why did Senator Warnock pull ahead? He pulled in because Cobb County made a large report, mostly early voting, but you see now the numbers there. But that's still at 56%. Why does Cobb County matter? 100,000 votes right now as we're still counting in the runoff. Let's just go back 1 month ago, 176,000 votes. This is a place where Senator Warnock, had a big advantage a month ago, and you watch it play out. So then you come across here. We're still waiting on Fulton County in the runoff here. We're at about 55% right now. He's at 82%. So if you stay around 80%, you've got 40+% of the vote to come in. A lot more votes for the Democrat to be had here. The other big change that happened, Jake, was DeKalb County, which was at about 5% estimated vote when you were here last time. As you see, they reported a large installment. That's them counting their early votes, the early mail-in ballots. And you see Senator Warnock just 92% when you round that up. Now, 92% now. A month ago, 84%. This is a big, predominantly Democratic county, so they're only at 45%, and that he made a huge jump. So if you're in the Walker campaign headquarters, you say, number one, still a ton of votes to come in this metropolitan Atlanta area and the suburbs around it, and it is blue. And you're likely, even if you narrow the gap with election day votes, it's likely there are going to be more Democrats there. The other problem is you just pick them. As you go through here, Coffee County, 95% of the vote in these rural areas where there's not a ton of votes, but Walker just needs to run it up like that, but 95% in, 99% in, 85% in, 99% in. So, you'll find some that are still in the 60s, but if you're looking at where the live outstanding votes are in a lot of rural Georgia where the Republicans run it up, you'll see when you look at it this perspective on the live outstanding votes, much tinier circles, right? That means a smaller piece of votes out there. Most of your votes are out here. And again, there are some Republican exurbs up here north of Atlanta, a little southwest of Atlanta here, but predominantly the votes are out in traditionally blue areas. Now, Republicans said they would surprise us today in the election day votes. That's what's still being counted in these areas. So the math is there. The color tells you if you're in the Warnock campaign, the color tells you, yes, you might have a bit of a seesaw still, 18,500 votes when you round that. But the map is filling in a way. Swing County here that are still blue. In the Warnock campaign, you're saying, okay, looks better now than it did 15 minutes ago. Let's hope it stays this way. But we got a lot of counting to do.
And when we get more vote in, we're going to have to go back, John, and take a look at whether Herschel Walker is matching what he did a month ago or exceeding what he did. But let's wait for a little bit more of that vote to come in, because I want to go to Pamela Brown now, who's at the voting desk, who has some new reporting. Pamela.
All right, so I'm learning from officials I've been speaking with on the phone today. In Gwinnett and Cobb counties there in the Atlanta area, all advanced in-person voting has been reported in both of those counties, according to the officials I've been speaking with. Now, in Gwinnett in particular, 24 out of 156 precincts have been reported. So what happens is the poll managers, they bring the card to the main area, and then they're pushed through. The numbers are pushed through. So still a lot of votes are weighing on for those who came out and voted today on Election Day. And when you look at Cobb County, as I said, all in-person early votes, they have been pushed through. Now what is left are the day of votes, so those who came to the polls today, and mail-in ballots as well. I'm told it's a smaller number of mail-in ballots because, of course, the shortened window for the runoff voting. But that is the situation there in Cobb County. And, of course, as we know, as we've been talking about, in Cobb County, they have until December 9th to count any ballots that came in by 7 p.m. today.
All right, so Pamela, so just to underline the point that you're making here, the two counties that you talked about, Cobb and was it DeKalb? Gwinnett. Cobb and Gwinnett counties, all of the early vote has been counted. Now that's what's outstanding are some of the mail-in ballots, but also primarily the day of voting, which will be less disproportionately Democrat, I would think, even though these are counties that are very disproportionately Democrat. No? I mean,
yes. The election day vote will be less Democratic. The question is, how much so?
Right.
In the case, the question being, is Herschel Walker running as Herschel Walker a month ago, or is he running closer to Brian Kemp a month ago? And let me explain. Let's use Gwinnett. This is where we are right now. If you look out here, I just pull out to show you that the lead has now shrunk to 3,900 votes. I just want to pull that out again.
Oh my goodness!
Welcome to the seesaw. We're going to go through this, right?
0.2%.
Right. So that means more votes are coming in. And again, just to Pam's point and to your question, more election day votes are being counted everywhere. And as that happens, the Republicans do better in the election day vote, and in these red counties, they do much better. The question is, are there enough of them? But just use Gwinnett as an example. Herschel Walker's getting 33 or 34%, if you want to round that up right now. Right? A month ago, he had 39%, which tells you we're still waiting to count election day votes. To your point, Republicans do better in the election day vote. But if he gets 39% again tonight, that may not be enough, because if you look in the governor's race, Brian Kemp gets 44%. So he loses the county, but he's much more competitive. And you see that all around Metro Atlanta. You see it in Fulton County, you see it in DeKalb, you see it everywhere you go. You see it in Cobb over here, you see it in Fayette, you see it in Douglas, you see it in Clayton. In all of those counties, Brian Kemp lost, but ran competitively. And then Brian Kemp wins all this. So that's Herschel Walker's problem right now, is he as we get more, as we move away, this is early vote, right? Can Herschel Walker move in Cobb County up from 35% closer as we get through it right here? Because look at that, 1,600 votes right now, 50-50, as you look at the race as more votes come in. So again, disproportionately, the votes are still out here, but if you look at the raw math at the moment, I didn't get much closer than that.
Pick a Republican county for me, just any Republican county. Okay. I want to try an experiment. So this is Cherokee County, one of the biggest Republican counties. Right. All right, so Herschel Walker has 68.8% of the vote with 80% in. Compare this to how he did a month ago, and then tell me how Brian Kemp did a month ago.
All right, so 1 month ago, Herschel Walker got the same, 68%, okay, right? He's a little above today, right? So if you round that up, he's at 69. Again, we have a ways to go still, so we'll see. But it's 69 now. He was at 68 a month ago, and Governor Kemp was at 74. I mean, that's the difference. So we were just talking about how Brian Kemp was competitive in the suburban Democratic counties. Brian Kemp also was stronger in the Republican counties. And so that is the defining question. With Kemp's involvement in the runoff, when we get to the final numbers here, in these Republican exurbs, right? So you have you come over here, you have Bartow County, it's much smaller. But then you come over here, Cherokee County, this is some serious math, 2.5% of the state population. Then you come here to Forsyth County, the 8th largest county. So you have two large Republican exurban counties here where Brian Kemp ran fantastically well. And Herschel Walker ran well, but not as strong. And
look, Herschel Walker is now taking
the race again. Yeah, in the race for the margins, we're welcome to the seesaw as it comes in. And so as you go up now, and we say we're at 76%, and again, I'm going to keep checking this to ask where are we still looking. And yes, Herschel Walker has taken the lead. If you're in the Democratic campaign quarters, you say,
calm down,
let's be calm, let's wait, let's check in an hour when we get more of these votes.
The story of this race, 50-50, only 2,288 votes ahead, but the Republican Herschel Walker taking the lead again in the seesaw. Started off with Warnock on top, then we had Walker on top, then we had Warnock on top, now we have Walker on top. Again, it's going back and forth. David Chalian, you have some information for us at the Battleground desk.
Jake, we're going to try to break down the vote here by voting method. Okay, so what we've done here, if you look, what you see is that if you look at just mail vote, that is an overwhelmingly favorable category for Raphael Warnock. He's winning it by 30 percentage points. And there's still, look here, 23.6% uncounted mail votes. Now, we think mail is the smallest portion of the vote overall. But let me add in now this early in-person vote. Here is a critical vote for Warnock. He's leading the early in-person vote, much of what we see in the vote boards that you're looking at with John, by 9.4%. How much of that is left to count? Well, most of it is counted. Only about 9.5% of that early in-person vote is left to be counted, but that is a good category for Warnock here. And again, I just want to say, if you add up both the early in-person and the mail, we think that's a majority of the vote. We expect that pre-election vote to be about 55% of the overall vote when the votes are counted. Those are strong Warnock categories. But here's the thing. The election day vote, Herschel Walker is currently winning by 32.8 percentage points. How much is left to be counted? We are still waiting on roughly 64% of the election day vote statewide. Now, I just want to say, if you, let me highlight Walker here. If you look at that lead, 32.8% that Walker currently has in the election day vote, if you look back in November, Walker won the election day vote by about 15 points. So right now, that is a much bigger margin of victory, meaning it's mostly rural, deep Republican areas that is giving him that big margin. This is why, as you guys are saying, we have to wait to see what that election day vote looks like from those big, populous Democratic counties in the Atlanta area to see if that margin of victory for Walker narrows, or if he can keep this big election day vote victory that may help him keep this 0.2% current lead that he has in the race, guys.
And right now, 76% in. Herschel Walker up 50.1% to Raphael Warnock's 49.9%. That's a difference of 0.2%. Herschel Walker just 3,093 votes ahead.
Yeah, so it's about as close as you get in a state. Remember, the Republican governor had a blowout victory just a month ago. Herschel Walker came in second in that race, which is why we're in this runoff. But this is an incredibly competitive state, one of the most tug-of-war states, if you will, in American politics right now. And so as you wait, David just made the key point. Herschel Walker, in the election day vote counted so far, most of it in these red rural counties, he's running it up. And that's what he needed to do. He's running it up. If he keeps that percentage, he's the next senator from Georgia. The question is, does he keep that percentage as we get in the election day vote counts here? Because what we're getting in Atlanta and the suburbs around it so far is just the early vote. And again, we're going to come back to this because it's a helpful tool for us in the live outstanding vote. In the votes still to be counted, that's why I have that circled, right? Again, we don't know how Herschel Walker did in predominantly Democratic areas, Atlanta and the suburbs around it, Cobb County, Gwinnett County, DeKalb County, Douglas County, Fayette County, all around in here. There's more as you go through Clayton County. We don't know how he did today, but he has to keep a big lead in the election day turnout, and that's the challenge for the next couple of hours as we get those votes. The early votes are counted. Now we're going to get the election day votes. 922 votes. 922 votes. It's a competitive state. It's a wild race. We'll keep counting.
All right, the Senate runoff is keeping everyone on the edge of their seats with about 3/4 of the votes in right now. We're going to get an update on where the ballots are still being counted from a key Georgia election official, Gabe Sterling. That's after this quick break. We'll be right back. A key race alert now. Look at the vote right now. 78% of the estimated vote in. And Republican Herschel Walker has taken the lead once again with 50.2% of the vote over Democratic incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock, who has 49.8% of the vote. Herschel Walker with a 0.4% of the vote lead, leading by roughly 8,200 votes right now. Let's go to pivotal Fulton County, Georgia, the home of Atlanta and the suburbs. Diane Gallagher is there. Diane, tell us more. More ballots just arrived there?
That's right, Jake. I don't know how much you can see behind me because there's a lot of observers also looking in that area. We can't go there, but we just had at least 2 election workers who came in escorted by police officers carrying these 2 blue canvas bags that include the ballot information. So we're talking about memory cards, other information they have to include with those ballots for them to then be able to process and upload it into the system here. Now look, here in Fulton County, I'm told by an election official that a conservative estimate for the number of ballots that are still outstanding is roughly more than 75,000. Now, that includes these election day in-person votes, but also many of those absentee ballots. Remember, they had 14,000 that came in before Election Day. And then, look, our cameras caught them bringing in election day absentee ballots that were dropped off at one of those 3 different locations that they could do that today. All of those absentee ballots in Fulton County have to be delivered already by now. It's by 7 p.m. today. And so what they're doing at this point behind me is they check in, they go through a whole bunch of paperwork that they have to sign. We've talked about the security measures that go into this. After they leave the precinct, they meet security, they go to a regional office there, and then security escorts them up into here, watching the police officer. Sometimes the police officer actually carrying those ballot bags up here.
All right, Diane Gallagher, thanks so much. Fascinating stuff from Fulton County. Georgia, the most populous county in the entire state. They want us to bring back Gabe Sterling right now. He's the Chief Operating Officer at the Georgia Secretary of State's office. Gabe, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. We're at nearly 80% of the vote count in. It's seesawed back and forth. Raphael Warnock, just in the last 10 seconds, has taken the lead once again with 79% of the vote. And because of what, John? Because DeKalb. More votes came in from DeKalb
Big
County.
report from DeKalb
What can
County.
you tell us about the votes that have yet to be counted, Gabe?
We don't know what they say. We have a lot of rural counties that have uploaded nothing yet. So we don't really know. The DeKalb County, what I'm really happy about is our large urban counties got their act together this time and really uploaded a lot of stuff early. DeKalb was one of our slower ones, and they've been uploading a lot of their stuff in the last half hour or so. But most of the Fulton's in. We got a chunk of Cobb that's still out. That metro, the giant donut hole for the metro of the entire state is right there. The 4 largest, most populous counties, which kind of can swing the vote one way or the other by themselves, are really coming in pretty quick. But it's so close. You know, those counties that have 10,000 votes, 4,000 votes, and they're going to go 80% for Walker, they're going to keep on coming in. Now, one of the interesting things about this is if you look at the geography of Fulton County, which is the largest county, they have to bring in their vote cards. It's 90 miles long, and people have to drive from the top and the bottom all the way to that central location at English Street Warehouse to get those things uploaded. So there's going to be time involved in those things. We had a car accident with one car carrying one of the cards. They had to bring the jaws of life out. Both of the poll workers are okay. They turned down medical attention to go to the hospital, but they were able to retrieve that vote card and get it to the Lowndes County Valdosta headquarters. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that happens on Elections Day because you have thousands of people out there doing their jobs.
Oh, holy smokes, I'm so glad that they're okay. That must have been awful to hear about. That's good news, though, I suppose, with the whole story in. Have you encountered any other hiccups with vote counting in any of the counties you're watching right now, other than that car accident?
Not hiccups per se. I mean, it's just normal processing. You have some people in some of our older elections directors in their counties, they want to give all their ducks in a row before they upload anything. We're like, we don't care if you have all your ducks in a row. Just give us what you know is correct so far. And a lot of them are doing that. DeKalb County is one of those, and thankfully they've loaded a few 100,000 ballots now. It's just going to be a long night. And, you know, earlier today, I said at 1.3 million, it's going to go one way for turnout today. At 1.5 million, it's going to go the other way. My nightmare was 1.4 million of turnout today. And guess what, guys? We had 1.4 million. So it's going to be a tight race. So it's going to be a while.
So it's John King, Gabe. Again, appreciate your time. So just to the point you were just making then. So we're at 1.4 and 1.4. So we're just shy of 2.8. What do you think the final universe is? We're about 2.8 million, a little shy of that right now. What do you think the final universe is?
I think 3.3-ish, somewhere in that range is what we're looking at for all the stuff. Well, the only thing we don't have any strong clarity into is the absentee ballots that came into today and some of the counties with their turnout today. We're making some estimations based on some data points that we had. But again, we're looking at probably a 3.3, which again, these are record numbers, guys, especially for a runoff in a midterm election. So I'm just excited that so many voters got to express their voice. But the mechanics of it now, like I said, we'll probably get that 2.5, and then it's going to start to slow down some just because of the nature of how this goes. So we could be here. I just tweeted out, it's going to be a long night, and guess what? It's going to be a long night.
Well, one more quick follow-up. You said you're waiting on some small rural counties to report votes. In our count, we only have one rural county, Dodge County, where we have absolutely nothing. In most of these other counties, most of the rural counties, we have a significant number of the vote. I'm just wondering, is this a question you meaning they haven't reported them on a statewide website left? I'm just going through. We have Coffee County at 99% of the estimated vote. Jeff Davis County at 99% of the estimated vote. I could go on and through them. You know them better than I do. It's just they're not reported on a statewide site yet, but the county is releasing and reporting its numbers. Is that what you're talking about?
In some cases, yes. But one of the things you need to be careful of when we talk about this 67% or 80%, That's not 80% of the vote. That's 80% of what the system is viewing as a type of vote within a precinct. This gets really deep into the weeds. But like if you have 2 tabulators in a single precinct and they upload 1 tabulator, the system says that is 100% of the votes in that 1/3 of that precinct because they're broken into absentee by mail, early vote in person, and election day. So you really have 33, 33, and 33 when they report these things. So there could be additional ballots inside those buckets. So we got to be careful. No, there's always going to be a few more votes out there than we think just by going by those.
Gabe, just one last question for you. Obviously, in December 2020, you were sadly ahead of the curve, warning that the election lies would lead to violence. And since then, obviously, there were people that were threatened and election workers in your state who have been threatened from the governor and the Secretary of State all the way down to precinct workers. How are things now for people who work on elections in Georgia? Has the fever subsided at all?
The fever's broken. You know, there's always a possibility, and our big concern has always been the lone wolf who's still angry about what happened in 2020 being stirred up by conspiracy theorists, and I won't name any names. I need to give them any more, attention than they've gotten. That's why Secretary Raffensperger in our state, we launched something called the Poll Worker First Response, which is a text tool that the majority of our counties had that poll managers could use to notify us at the state, their elections director, and local law enforcement if any actual threat made itself known on election day at the polling location. Thankfully, we have not had to use that anywhere. There's always sort of an underlying thing, especially on the internet, but we haven't seen nearly the level of vitriol we saw at the 2021 runoff or the threats or intimidation or anger that's out there. I think we're hopefully getting closer and closer to regular order.
I hope so. I hope so, and I'm glad that the election workers are okay. Thank you so much for checking in with us again. We know that you're pretty busy tonight. Stay with us. If you blink, you might miss another change in the lead of the Georgia Senate runoff. Ballot counters are working into the night. More results, more suspense, more votes ahead. Stay with us. And I have a key race alert for you right now. With 82% of the estimated vote in, Democratic incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock maintains a lead over Republican Herschel Walker. Warnock with 50.4% of the vote. Walker with 49.6% of the vote. That is a lead of roughly 0.8% or 19,000 votes. So let's go to Nick Valencia in Cobb County, Georgia. Another key location where votes are being processed in county, a populous county in Georgia. Nick, tell us what you're seeing.
Well, if you're wondering where some of those day of votes are, here they are here for the county. You're seeing them come in now, being loaded off from these cars that have been lined up, a very well-oiled machine that they have here. And what you're looking at here are not only some of the election supplies, the actual physical ballots, also poll pads and the memory cards that hold the results from those individual precincts. So we really saw this activity pick up as soon as polls closed at 7 p.m. This has been really just a steady flow of traffic throughout. Cobb County has about 147, or actually 147 exactly, precincts. We don't know exactly how many precincts have reported so far. That's a question that we asked the chairwoman here for the Board of Elections. But this is just really cool stuff here, Jake. You could see democracy in action. As I mentioned, a very well-oiled machine. Those precincts are there verified here at the front door, and then they're taken into the center where we were showing you a short time ago, where those votes are tabulated, and then they are eventually reflected in the overall election result. We did ask here Tori Silas, the chairwoman of Cobb County, exactly when they would be done vote counting. She couldn't give us an answer on that or how many precincts, again, had reported. But you're seeing here, as I'm reporting, more and more votes coming in. So a lot of work here left to be done in Cobb County.
All right, Nick Valencia in Marietta, Georgia, Cobb County. Dana?
Thanks, Jake. And I want to go straight to you, Manu, because I know you've been talking to your sources. You've got some new reporting.
Yeah, I mean, several Republican sources that I speak to, they're happy that this race is close, but they believe that the path is still going to be pretty complicated here, given just where the outstanding vote lies. And if it does not turn out in the favor, you're going to start to hear a lot of finger pointing and blame game. And some of that is already starting to play out. One of that is over the turnout operation, the get out the vote operation. This is such an essential part of campaigns, finding your voters, getting them to the polls. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Republican leader super PAC, put about $2 million into Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia. his get out the vote operation. One of the sources that I spoke to credits that as helping keeping this race close, and also criticizing on the other side the National Republican Senatorial Committee, the Republican National Committee, for not having as strong of a get out the vote operation. You've also heard some of this play out over the last several months.
Absolutely.
Mitch McConnell and Rick Scott, who leads that Republican Senatorial Committee, they're differed over tactics and strategy. Scott, of course, challenged McConnell to be the next Republican leader. So this is only going to start to play out more fully and more publicly if it does not turn out the way the Republicans hope. But there's still a lot of vote left.
It's just been astonishing to see the way that these top Republicans who historically, at least in recent times, have put on such a sort of facade of unity, it's totally broken down. And that even happened before they lost a lot of the races that they hoped that they would win.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Republican Party very much is in a finding themselves mode, especially after the results of these midterms, which were much more disappointing than they expected. I think in Georgia, though, there is a lot of blame to go around. I mean, as you both know, Mitch McConnell held his nose and ultimately did back Herschel Walker, even though he wasn't fully comfortable with him to begin with. And I think there will be some questions about whether that was actually a wise decision or if he should have held his own and said, no, this is not going to work for the state of Georgia. I think it would be easier now to make the case that he was on the right side of this argument. It's just hard to do that. But Manu is absolutely right. You know, Republicans that I've talked to in recent days, everyone is pretty much on the same page that I think without Brian Kemp's on-the-ground operation in this runoff period, it would have been much more difficult to get this race to a point where it is very close right now. So they have that, but it still, I think, you know, what we're all hearing is that it still may not be enough.
And that's, you talk about Governor Kemp and his operation, and it sort of speaks to something that is important to underscore tonight, which is that he is the Republican governor who won by big, big numbers in November last month. And other Republicans won. It did very well in Georgia. Yes, it is a purple state right now, but if you look at the lesson, even if Herschel Walker comes through and ends up winning tonight, the fact that it is so close when other Republicans did so well so relatively easily is a reminder of a lot of things. One of them is that Herschel Walker doesn't just have the Donald Trump albatross around his neck. He is almost in the embodiment of Donald Trump. And a lot of, I'm not even talking about Democratic voters, a lot of Republican voters, mine who are really angry about what Donald Trump did in 2020.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, that's one reason why Mitch McConnell almost had no choice but to endorse Herschel Walker in the Republican primary, because Herschel Walker was running away with it because he had the support of Donald Trump, and the field essentially cleared out. There were some nominal candidates, but essentially McConnell had no choice, decided he was going to get on board. But don't forget that Mitch McConnell tried to get David Perdue, the former Republican senator, into the race, try to see if he was interested. Kelly Loeffler, the former Republican senator, into this race. He was unsuccessful on both, ultimately deciding to get behind where the base was, where Trump was, and that at the end of the day could have been a fateful
And David Perdue, the former senator, was enticed into a race, but he was enticed by Donald Trump to run on a primary against Governor Kemp, and it was like 50 points.
Right,
I mean, it was a complete blowout.
And I think in some ways we might look back on this and say maybe this was a miscalculation by some Georgia Republicans about who had a lot of fear about what crossing Trump would mean. If you're Kemp or you're Raffensperger, it just wasn't all it was cracked up.
Okay, as we're talking, look at that. 50.0, 50.0. I mean, look at that. How many votes? Like 200 votes?
I'm sorry.
Not even 200 votes. Unbelievably close.
Yeah, I mean, but even that, I just have to say.
Did it just flip as we were talking? Okay, now it's 50.1 to 49.9.
One thing that, I mean, you do also hear a lot about, we talked earlier in the night, is Georgia a purple state or not? A lot of people are looking at this race and saying the fact that this race is very close. Herschel Walker is a very flawed candidate. Let's be honest about it. He is not someone who has even been on the campaign trail much in the last few weeks. He is not the best surrogate for him, spokesperson for himself. He has accusations of domestic abuse, accusations of infidelity against him, and yet, because of partisanship,
look at those numbers.
You're looking at basically a tied race at this point in the night, and a very when all the votes are counted, it's still probably going to be a very close race because of the just sheer partisanship of the state.
And at this hour, you see on your screen 50.1% for Herschel Walker, Raphael Warnock 49.9%. I mean, the seesaw, the back and forth, we've seen it all night. We'll probably continue to see it as those votes are counted. We're getting deeper into this tense election night with more and more votes being counted. You see on your screen there where that's actually happening. We're going to talk more about this on the other side of a break.
And welcome back. Key race alert. Take a look right now. It is almost dead even. Herschel Walker, 2,360 votes ahead with 85% of the votes counted in the state of Georgia. I want to check in with our Jeff Zeleny, who is reporting tonight. Jeff, what are you hearing from the campaign?
Anderson, there's no doubt that optimism has been rising here really steadily throughout the evening at the Herschel Walker campaign, which is at the College Football Hall of Fame, which is, of course, is where he got his name and his start and his fame here in Georgia. But as this race has really seesawed with votes trickling in back and forth, with Walker often having a narrow lead, his supporters that you can see behind me are watching all of this in some stride, some in a sense of disbelief, but others we talked to said, look, they always expected this would be fairly close. You'll remember a month ago in November, Raphael Warnock only defeated Herschel Walker by some 37,000 votes. So this was a very close race, but the strategists that I'm speaking with inside the Warnock operation are perhaps not as optimistic as some of the supporters watching these numbers come in, because they are looking ahead at other numbers that have not yet come in. And a lot of those numbers that have not yet come in, as John King has been reporting all evening, are in the metro Atlanta area, where there is good reason to believe that Raphael Warnock has a good base of support. So there is a sense, at least among some advisors, that Herschel Walker perhaps has hit his high water mark. One advisor tells me the next few hours could be tough, but the reality is this is still a very, very close race. So we are going to have to be patient. Many supporters here are having a few drinks, watching these results come in, and frankly enjoying this very tough race, because a lot of Democrats believed that Senator Warnock would have simply walked away with this. That has not been the case here tonight. So there's no doubt the Walker advisors say they still see a path to victory, but their optimism does not exactly spell out what that is or go beyond that. Anderson.
All right, Jeff, thanks very much. I want to go to Eben McCann, who's at Raphael Warnock's headquarters. What's the reaction there?
Well, Anderson, Ludacris is playing behind me, so I'm going to have to shout over you. But listen, as the vote totals volley back and forth all night, a Democratic operative telling me that they always knew that this race was going to be a nail-biter. But they're still confident because so much of Metro Atlanta, those votes still need to be counted. But here is where some Democrats are seeing some hope. Clark County, Georgia. That, is, of course, is the home to the University of Georgia, where Senator Warnock spent a lot of time campaigning. Senator Warnock received 47.5% of the vote, which is more than 3 points higher than the general election. But ultimately, a Democratic operative telling me the counties we need the strongest showing in are going to take a long time to tally. Anderson?
Eva, appreciate it. Thanks very much. Here with our team in New York, I want to start with Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan. What do you make of where the race is right now, the counties that have reported?
Well, one, I want to compliment Brad Raffensperger, Gabe Sterling, and all the county officials. It seems like we have another legal, fair, and a well-run election in Georgia, and so we don't ever want to take that for granted. But certainly it does look like the metro area is still got to count the largest number of votes. It seems, history points us in a different direction away from Republicans in that case. But certainly it was a nail-biter, and it's going to play out that way. I sit here as a Republican, as a conservative, as a lifelong conservative, just thinking what could have been. What could have been if the quality of the candidate, like Mitch McConnell pointed to several months ago, was better. We wouldn't even be in a runoff right now. We would be an 8-point winner in the general election, just like Brian Kemp.
Ashley, what are you hearing from folks?
I mean, I'm not going to say that Warnock would get beat by 8 points. We probably would have still been in a runoff. Warnock is a strong senator. He is like part of a historical context of the state of Georgia. He's done a lot of bipartisan legislation. But your candidate, Herschel Walker, the Republican candidate, is a disaster. Yeah. My concern actually is, why is it so close?
That's what I'm talking about.
I'm like, who is still voting for Herschel Walker after the last 3 weeks? I do think Warnock closed strong. I still think he's going to, I always thought it was going to go into a runoff. I think he's going to pull it out tonight because we still have a strong base of voters in the metro Atlanta area that just haven't been counted yet.
Here's why it's close. Because for all the talk we've had about Herschel Walker and Donald Trump tonight, what we haven't discussed yet is Joe Biden is not popular. He's not popular in Georgia. There's a reason he's been in Boston and Arizona and everywhere else. His policies aren't popular. People aren't happy with the economy. There are flashing red lights here for Republicans, and I've been on that since election night back in November. But if you're a Democrat looking at how you won this race and barely beating Herschel Walker and having to draw some of these Republican candidates you did in this midterm, there has to be some introspection here because Biden is not the answer.
We're getting a lot more votes in. I want to go to John King at the Magic Wall. John?
Anderson, as you guys were having the conversation, Senator Warnock has now pulled ahead. Welcome back to the seesaw by 18,516 votes. Still remarkably close, 50.3 to 49.7. So what just happened? You heard everyone talking about we're waiting on the metro Atlanta area. Well, the closest piece, the most central piece of the metro Atlantic area is Fulton County, which is Atlanta and the suburbs to the north and the south. Again, runs about 90 miles total. We just got a large installment of votes here. And that's what you see. Senator Warnock right now running, still staying above 80%, nearly 82% in Fulton County. This is the challenge as the rest of the votes play out. We know that right now we're at about 87% count statewide. We know that the bulk of the outstanding votes are in this, I think the Georgians call it the donut hole, right there, Atlanta, around Atlanta and the suburbs around it. And we're waiting to see. Herschel Walker's challenge was, can he run it up on the election day vote? He did that in some of these rural areas, not by the big math I think he needed to do it by. The challenge now is as they count the votes in these remaining, the most populous counties in the state, most of them are right up here, Anderson. So we're looking, again, we just got Fulton County, but we still have a third of the vote out, right? Raphael Warnock right now is getting nearly 82% in Fulton County. If he stays above 75%, well, he's going to be reelected because so many votes are still outstanding here. You move over to Cobb County there, we're still at 68%. So you have Scott with you, you got Lieutenant Governor Duncan with you. That Lieutenant Governor knows the math here very well. Gwinnett County, about 75%. Raphael Warnock running at 64%. Again, that's how he's doing so far tonight. You go back a month ago, he was at 58%. So at the moment, Senator Warnock is overperforming his performance a month ago in Atlanta and the suburbs around it. We're not done counting the election day votes yet. That is Herschel Walker's comeback plan. But you see all that deep blue up there right now. You see an 18,491 vote lead. The seesaw has swung back to the Democrats as the votes in metro Atlanta begin to get counted, more of the election day votes.
Lieutenant Governor, I want to go to you. When you see the counties that we're still getting votes from, what does it tell you about what lies ahead in the next couple hours?
Yeah, I think it's all going to be determined on the intensity. I always call it the eyebrow across the top of Atlanta, right? It's those suburbs from north or from west to east across the north end. And it looks like the intensity, if we're using Gwinnett County as a metric, the Democratic intensity looks to be a little bit more outpaced than it was in the general.
And the vote from Fulton County, I mean, I think John said, John, what was it, a third still haven't come in?
You always wait for the final turnout numbers as they count the, it's possible that number swings a little bit as you find out what the final turnout is, but our team's very smart at this, so we have it at about 67%. That could be, maybe it's 66, maybe it's 68, but again, right now, Senator Warnock is getting 82% in Atlanta, Fulton County, and the suburbs. Again, Atlanta's here, right? It stretches up to the suburbs, beginning of the exurbs here when you get to the top of Fulton County. But let's just go back. 82% now if you round that up. 73%, 74% if you round that up. This is Lieutenant Governor Duncan is making this point, and I think Scott is making the same point. Scott's right. Joe Biden's not terribly popular in Georgia right now. However, nor is Donald Trump in the sense, if you go back to the governor's race, Governor Kemp lost Fulton County. But he got 31%, right? You say, oh, 31%. He got shellacked. He did get shellacked. But the question is, what are the margins? Look what happened to Herschel Walker was only 25%. That matters. The margins in a big populous county like that matter. And so you come fast forward to where we are right now. Herschel Walker at the moment is getting 19% of the vote in Fulton County. Republican is not going to win Fulton County. But a Republican cannot be below 20% in Fulton County and expect to win a statewide election because so many people live there. That's just simple math. We'll see if it holds up as we get the final installment of the vote. But if you look at Herschel Walker right now at 19% in Fulton County, that's a wow.
Yeah. Gloria Borges?
Yeah, I keep thinking about independent voters because that's what it's going to come down to in this race. And initially, Warnock won independent voters by 11 points, but they're only 24% of the electorate. So polling that we and others have done show Warnock winning them by about 2 to 1. Now, the question is, what's going to get these independent voters to turn out? And we don't really know the answer to that because it's not as if, and this is DeVan's point earlier, it's not as if they're motivated by Democrats, right? They're not saying, I'd rather support Democrats right now because I love their policies and I think they're great, and I'm going to side with Democrats more than Republicans. Biden is popular, as you say. Georgia is a red state. We know that.
I think
but the Democrats can't jump for joy, is what I'm saying here.
Though the Democrats, I think, have a lot to be proud of because of, listen, Winston Churchill said, deserve victory. Deserve victory. Do everything that you can to win. And I got to say, Herschel Walker went from being like the werewolf to being like the invisible man. Like, I don't know where he's been the past 3 or 4 days. But Warnock put it all on the table. Barack Obama put it on the table. Millions of dollars spent. There's a hunger to win that you see when a true public servant like Warnock wants to get in there and do a good job. You see that hunger. I don't know where Walker's even been.
Let me tell you what I'm hearing from Republicans in Georgia about the end of this campaign. It's going to be close. I think there's a lot of pessimism in the Walker Republican camp that Warnock's got. We haven't called it. I know we're still counting the votes. But credit where credit's due. They're saying to me the reason this race is close is because Brian Kemp and Brian Kemp's organization, which went to work for the Senate Leadership Fund in this race, that's one of the key reasons why Walker, who's been a little invisible on this thing and has obviously had an uneven ride here the last 4 weeks, has been able to keep it close. So why are people turning out? Why is Walker able to pull in some votes? I think the people who are really in the know at the strategy level on these campaigns would say one man, Brian Kemp.
I think that's absolutely right. And while I do think that what I'm hearing from folks on the ground is they anticipate it's not going to be a good night for Walker, but this is a very bad candidate, but he's had the full weight of the Republican Party behind him in this runoff. So when you're seeing this margin get closer, it's because of Mitch McConnell, the Senate Leadership Fund. It's Brian Kemp's operation on the ground. There was no closing message there. This is what was, Republicans, we were pulling our hair out. Like, what is your closing message, Herschel Walker? But at least the money was there in the operation.
Well, the message was, he's going to be a rubber stamp for Biden, and I'm not. And that was about it. It's not that I'm more competent. It's not that I'm more fit to be a United States senator. It's not that I have the experience. It's not that you should trust me. It's that, I'm not going to vote with Biden.
Ashley?
I do think, to your point, Scott, that Kemp's ground game accelerated. There was a ground game for Warnock that went from 100 to 150.
Talk about it.
All of that effort that was split between Stacey Abrams and Warnock went to Warnock. And people knocked doors and called. Everybody that I know went to Georgia to help pull this out. It was not just, Democrats didn't say, you know what, we got the Senate and we're okay and we're going to relax. They want this seat. They were going to fight for it, and I think they'll get it.
Both campaigns are on edge as this razor close runoff appears to be going down to the wire. Will we know the winner tonight? Well, stay with us. Find out.
And we have a key race alert for you right now, the latest from the Senate runoff in Georgia, with 88% of the estimated vote in. Incumbent Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock is up with 50.1% of the vote, trailing just barely behind him with 49.9%, just 0.2 percentage points behind him, Republican Herschel Walker. That is a lead right now of Warnock of 9,026 votes. Now, why does this race matter? Let's talk about the overall balance of power in the U.S. Senate. Democrats currently hold 50 Senate seats, including one they picked up in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Republicans have 49. They are hoping to get this one last remaining Senate seat so as to have the balance of power be 50-50. Let's go to Pamela Brown right now, who is at the voting desk. Pamela, what's the latest?
Well, there's a lot of focus on the counties in the Atlanta area, and for good reason, given how tight this race is. And I just spoke to an official in Cobb County there, And I'm told around 76,000 votes are still outstanding, day of votes. That means those people who went to the polls today, they are in Cobb County, those votes are still outstanding. So we're still expecting a pretty large amount from there. And there's about 12,000 or so outstanding votes from mail-in ballots as well. Now, I asked the source when we're going to find out more, when more votes will drop from there. And this person said as soon as they drive back from the polling areas with the memory cards, they're plugged in and uploaded into the system. So we'll just have to wait and see. But it is certainly getting down to the wire now. And I just also talked to Gabriel Sterling, the election official there on the ground that we've been talking to throughout the night. And he said after 10 o'clock, this is when we're going to be getting a better picture now of the outstanding votes in these urban areas in the Atlanta area, and also learn more about when we're going to get to find out what those votes are.
All right, Pamela Brown, thank you so much. Let's take a look at some of these counties where the vote is still outstanding because, John, the reason why we're hearing from Jeff Zeleny that there are people in the Walker campaign who are still kind of nervous, even though he's only 13,785 votes behind, and then certainly with 11% of the vote outstanding, that could be quickly covered up, is because a lot of the outstanding vote is in these Democratic-leaning counties that are very populous.
Most of it is right there. Most of the vote still to be counted is inside that circle. And what do you notice about that circle? Not only is it blue, to your point, not only is it blue, Pam was just talking about Cobb County. Raphael Warnock is getting 62% of the vote right now. Doesn't mean it won't come up a little bit more than that, but that's one there. So you're in Cobb County over there. You come across to the other side. Back in the day, George W. Bush carried this county. Used to be a Republican county. Look at that. 90% of the vote now in 62% of the vote for Raphael Warnock. So not only is the vote is in these blue areas, but so far in the early vote and the day of vote counted so far, Senator Warnock is keeping these big edges in these counties. Again, Fulton County, we're up to 67% now. Let me get rid of the circle so it doesn't distract people. But 67% is still above 80%. So as the rest of that comes in, is it possible Herschel Walker does better than 19%? Of course it is. Of course it is. The question is it enough when you get to this point? So you come back out, 15,373 votes again. Again, most of the vote outstanding here. Not all of it. You can look at it this way as well to see where the rest of it is. There are some small pockets of votes. You see in the red circles are Republican areas. So there are some Republican votes out there. But you see these big circles and so many circles here. This is, again, Fulton County, the suburban counties around it, that when you come back to the normal map, not only are they blue, when you go county by county, they're very deep blue. And so if you're in the Warnock campaign, you're ahead. We're up to 90% of the vote now. And you know what has happened in the last several elections. This is the area that tends to come in late. You just heard describing they're driving the voting cards from the precincts at the headquarters. They put the card, and you watch votes are changing. It's 12,419 votes are changing as we're having this conversation because a few, sometimes it's a couple hundred, sometimes it's several thousand, and off you go. But you're up to 91% now. If you're in Vegas, that's your bet. We're not done yet, but if because you know where the outstanding votes are. That's why there's some pessimism in the Walker campaign.
Do you have a button that can show me where and whether either of these candidates are underperforming what they did last time, or
Yes.
Brian Kemp?
Yeah, and I'll do it with the caveat that we're not done yet.
Right. Well, obviously we're not done.
So we're not done. So the key one there is this: Herschel Walker trailed. Right, a month ago Herschel Walker trailed. That's why we're having the runoff. We had 3 candidates then. Nobody got above 50, but he trailed. Right, he was trailing. So he needed to do better. Just put it this way: he needed to do better. Right? Where is Herschel Walker overperforming? He is overperforming in some of these red counties. That means his percentages are higher now than they were a month ago, and that's significant. That's a lot of places, right? But look what's gray. So here's the flip side of that question. That's where he's overperforming. Where is he underperforming? Well, he's underperforming in all the blue areas on the map.
In all the population centers.
In all the exactly.
That means he did better in these population centers last time, even though he came up short, than he's doing tonight.
Right, with the asterisk, to be fair to him, we need to double check that when we get to 100%, but at the moment, that's his problem, that you are so far in the night, you're underperforming in the places where the people live. In the toxicity in the suburbs of the Trump brand, and Walker himself, I think, has additional problems unique to him in the suburbs. That's what you're seeing here. This is the suburbs.
So the other question I have is, because there were 3 candidates on the ballot last time, it is possible for both Warnock and Walker to be overperforming this time, just as a matter of math, because there's only 2 of them.
Correct.
Can you show me where Warnock is overperforming and underperforming? his last time on the ballot in November.
And so you see here, where is he overperforming? He's running a little stronger in a lot of these rural counties. And again, that's a couple hundred votes, right?
This is Warnock?
That's Walker. I'm sorry. Let's come back and hit the wrong one there. We need Warnock overperforming. This is where Warnock is overperforming in the general election. But it's true. It was the same thing. I looked at this earlier. That's why I said he is running by percentages. It's a tiny, modest amount.
He's doing better in more places than he was a month ago than Walker is that was doing a month ago.
By a very tiny amount in most of these rural areas, but tiny amounts. Yeah, right. Exactly. That's exactly the right expression, because he's doing it here where it matters, in the major population centers, in the smaller urban areas, Columbus, Augusta, Savannah, where the Democrats live. He's doing better. This is where he's from, this part of the state here. He's doing better where the Democrats live, and he's also doing a little better in places that tend to vote red. And that has been, again, Stacey Abrams, a strong Democratic candidate, did horribly in rural Georgia. Raphael Warnock doesn't do great, but he does better. And just as we talked about underperforming for the Republicans in the suburbs, Senator Warnock performs, and maybe it's just Herschel Walker. We'll see how this one ends up, but he tends to overperform. And then you ask the other question: so where is Warnock underperforming? Only in a few, only in a few counties. And again, we're not at the finish line yet. So to be fair, you need to look at this when we get to 100%. But if you get your indications now, the reason, and it's down to a 4,000 vote lead. I mean, this is still a very competitive race. Right. The issue is when you just walk around and trying to look, at the places where there are Republican votes, you're at 99%. You're at 99%. I'm just picking these counties randomly just to see, and you just see all of them are at 99%. I'm not trying to make anybody dizzy at home, but you're seeing the 99% in these small Republican rural counties, and then you come up here where the Democratic votes are, like DeKalb, 65%, and you look at 157,000 votes there, 15,000 votes there, just by comparison, right? So you got a third of the vote still to be counted here, and you come out to these smaller counties, and even if there's still some to be counted, you're talking 16,000 votes. So the people, more than 50% of the population is right here in this circle, and that's where most of the outstanding votes are. So again, 4,000 votes, you're not celebrating yet, but understanding where the outstanding votes are, if you're in Vegas, that's your bet.
Right. I still don't know who's going to win. Right. I'd rather be ahead by 4,000 votes than behind by 4,000 votes. Let's get more on Cobb County, John, if you could punch it up, because Nick Valencia is there, specifically in Marietta. And Nick, a key election official is with you. I don't think she has IFB, though, so you're going to have to relay the questions that we have for her.
Yeah, and we're getting updates here from that election official. I want to bring in the chairwoman of the Cobb County Board of Elections, Tori Silas. Tori, we got an update a little while ago from Pamela Brown, who tells me 76,000 election day votes, 12,000 mail-in votes. Does that match up with what you're seeing here?
Well, we don't have numbers that come in. Essentially, we basically have precincts that drop off their media and everything.
Which is what we're seeing out here,
exactly.
is the line of cars coming in, dropping off those ballots.
That's correct. And for the most part, the last that I checked, we were at about 125 precincts that have closed. Well, all of the precincts are closed, but that have made their way back here. So we've got, 22 more to go.
So you're more than halfway there. You have 147 precincts, 122, is that right, that have reported?
The last time I checked, yes.
And those are day of ballots,
That
right?
is correct.
But you're under a court order here to allow ballots, absentee ballots, received until December 9th. Can you tell us a little about it, clarify that?
Certainly. So there were a number of voters that requested absentee ballots, and based upon the day that they requested it and the date in which we placed their ballot in the mail, a lawsuit was filed by the ACLU, the SPLC, on behalf of those voters. And one of our Superior Court judges issued an order requiring that we extend the date for a particular group of voters, that being those voters that requested applications prior to the 27th, giving them the opportunity to get their ballots back here by December the 9th, which is a date that we were already looking at because that's the UCAVA date, the date by which military families and U.S. citizens that are abroad can get their ballots back. But those ballots must have been either returned here in person or, for that matter, postmarked by today.
So to punctuate this point, if it's close, like it has been, it could come down to Cobb County. I mean, that's a realistic possibility.
Potentially.
Yeah. Jake Tapper and our anchor, John King, they've got some questions for you as well. I know you don't have IFB, so I'll just relay. Go ahead, Jake.
Just how smoothly is the process going of counting the ballots right now? It looks, from what we can see from our vantage point, like it's going well. There aren't protests. There are observers from both parties, et cetera.
Yeah, how smoothly has this process gone so far? From what we're seeing from our vantage point, it seems pretty smooth, but you tell us what you're seeing.
No, I think as elections days go, it's been a great day, in as much that none of our polling locations were delayed in opening. They all opened right on time. We didn't report any issues with respect to closing. There were no memory cards that were left behind, no issues reported to us by poll managers, and I think that's is kind of proven out, if you will, by the fact that I believe it's just after 10 p.m. and we have just probably, as I see cars come in, probably about 20 more precincts to return.
You got to be grateful for that here.
I'll take what I can get.
John, do you have a question?
Yes, I'll sneak in a question. One sec, Nick. I just want to note, as we're standing here, Herschel Walker has now pulled ahead. It's 50% to 50%, but Herschel Walker, the Republican, has a 1,922 vote lead, and this is the magic of election night. Different results are coming in from different places. But back to where you are in Cobb County. Madam Chair just said that there are 22 precincts, I believe, if I have the math right, that are still out. The question is, and it may be an unfair question because I know she's busy, Nick, but do we know where they are in the county, in the sense that the precincts that are on this side of the county, the eastern part closer to Atlanta, are more Democratic? You notice all the red around the west and the northern part of Cobb County. If they're from the more remote areas out here, then Herschel Walker may have some hope because there are a lot of Republican voters out here. Do we know what's outstanding in terms of where it is geographically in the county?
So this may be an unfair question, and it is a little bit of a long question. We were updating because while we were speaking, Walker took the lead. Do we know which precincts are still outstanding? Because, for our expert there, John King at the Magic Wall, it can determine which way this could go and give us sort of an insight to how this is going. Do we know which precincts are still outstanding?
Unfortunately, I do not know which precincts are outstanding. It's a situation where, I'm provided updates. All of the board members that are here working this evening are provided updates with respect to however many precincts are in, but, the list doesn't say that these are the precincts that are outstanding.
And perhaps another unfair question, but I know the viewers want to know, when will you be done counting? Do you know?
Technically, we won't be done until December the 9th, to be quite honest, because of those UCAVA ballots. But this evening, again, I feel confident and comfortable that we are likely to finish earlier than we did last month for the general election. I'm hoping probably between 11 p.m. and midnight.
11 p.m. and midnight. Thank you so much for the update. You're hopeful. We are hopeful. Thank you so much for the time here. We know you're really busy. You're actually working in the back here.
Indeed.
John and Jake, we'll throw it back to you and try to get some more updates as they come in.
Thanks, Nick. And John, while Walker took the lead, tell us where those votes came from.
All right, so we were talking to Nick and the chairwoman here in Cobb County. They came from here more to the north and the east in Forsyth County. Again, this is one of the Republican exurban counties. And you see, it's the 8th largest county in the state, and Herschel Walker's getting 66% of the vote there. That's where we had a large chunk of votes reported, and that's why he took the lead. And again, it's just fascinating to just watch the tug-of-war that is today's Georgia. Today's Georgia, where if you go back 20 years ago, there's a lot more red in these suburbs. They have become pretty reliably Democratic suburbs. So what do you have around? Just imagine wherever you live, right? You live in an urban area, you drive out, you have the close-in suburbs, and then you go a little further out where you start seeing maybe a couple of farms still, and then you're out in the exurbs and the box stores and things like that. That's what this is up here. Reliably Republican exurban areas and more rural. If you go north, again, Atlanta's down here. The closer you get to Atlanta, it's more suburban, exurban. Starts to get a little bit more rural out here. Forsyth County, those exurban counties giving Herschel Walker some good votes tonight. His problem is closer in Atlanta and the suburbs around it.
All right, the tug-of-war continues. The seesaw with more than 90% of the vote reported. Will the lead in this neck-and-neck race keep flipping as we await more votes coming in? We're going to talk to a key Senate Democrat about the closeness of this race and the stakes. Stay with us. And I have a key race alert for you right now. If you look on the big board, with 91% of the vote in, Raphael Warnock, the incumbent Democratic senator, has taken the lead once more in this seesaw of a night. Warnock with 50.2% of the vote. Republican Herschel Walker has 49.8% of the vote. He trails by 0.4%. Right now, Raphael Warnock is 14,362 votes ahead, with 93% of the estimated vote in. Still more votes to count. Let's go to Phil Manningly, who's at the White House for us. Phil, our chief White House correspondent, what are we hearing about the runoff and the very close results from President Biden?
Yeah, Jake, as close as things are right now, over the course of the last hour, we've picked up some cautious optimism from White House officials as they've been looking at where the vote stands that has not been reported yet, those places where vote is outstanding. The president was on Air Force One, has been on Air Force One for the last several hours, where one official tells me he has been regularly briefed on what his political team has been seeing. And that briefing clearly, or those briefings clearly left him very optimistic as well. He just deplaned after landing at Joint Base Andrews, and shortly before boarding his motorcade back to the White House, he was asked how he was feeling about Georgia. Take a listen.
Mr. President, how are you feeling about Georgia? Any reaction to the Georgia Senate race? George, what do you think, George? We can't hear you.
The joys of trying to get sound when Air Force One is nearby in a large motorcade. What the president said there is, we're going to win. We're going to win Georgia. Now, obviously, no projection has been made right now, but that underscores the sense of optimism as Democrats and as White House officials have been watching this race play out. It is certainly as close as can possibly be at this moment in time. But the key thing one official made clear they're looking at right now is where the outstanding vote is. I'll defer to the expert John King on those specifics, but it's very clear that the president and his team right now are seeing things that look good to them. How that plays out over the course of the next couple of hours, we'll obviously have to see, but the president pretty definitive, saying he believes, at least at this moment, Senator Raphael Warnock is going to win re-election as it currently stands.
All right, Phil Mattingly at the White House for us. Thanks so much. We're joined right now on our panel by Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat of Minnesota, chair of the Senate Rules Committee. Senator, thanks so much for coming in. Really appreciate it. So let me ask you a question. The Democrats already are going to have control of the Senate. They've already won 50 seats. You have already won 50 seats with the pickup in Pennsylvania. What does it matter on a practical level in terms of control of the Senate if you have 51 seats or 50 plus Vice President Harris?
Sure. Well, let me go to the practical and then the moral. The practical is that it will make it easier for us to get nominations to the floor. We've seen a lot of obstruction on that point. A number of the president's nominees are still waiting for key positions in different agencies, judges. Even though we've confirmed 90 of them, we have many more to do. But the moral is Raphael Warnock. We love the guy. He is a true, amazing patriot in terms of the work that he's done for his state, the leadership he's shown on health care, and we want Reverend Warnock back. We are feeling really good about this. All these votes that are out in Fulton County and in the metropolitan area, I think bodes well. We always knew this was going to be a tough race, Jake. No one thought it was going to be a landslide, but we feel good.
Okay, maybe nobody thought it was going to be a landslide. That's very fair. Now, at this moment, Raphael Warnock is almost 26,000 votes ahead. But when you sat down, it was like an 800 vote difference. And I want to ask you what
That's because I'm good luck. So
what I'm getting. I'm ask you the question that I'm getting from a lot of Democrats tonight, which is, why was it so close, given the way that you and others have described and the reality of what Republicans have said about Herschel Walker?
Well, first of all, let's remember that Georgia has been a red state for quite a while. And it was only 2 years ago when the nation was stunned because of the quality of our candidates when Senator Ossoff and Warnock won in a runoff. I don't think a lot of people, Manu, were saying, they were not saying, oh, I would bet that the Senate was going to change hands because 2 Democrats were going to beat 2 incumbent Republicans in the Senate. So let's start with that. This is a changeover. Secondly, we have the fact that the rules have been stacked against us here. Not many states have a runoff. That's why all the other states have been resolved. This is not necessarily good for Democrats, runoffs. It's hard for working people to vote in a runoff. So let's go to the next problem. They stacked the rules. They made major changes to the rules, including that you couldn't register in a runoff. In the last election, tens of thousands of people registered in the runoff. We were not allowed to do that in this election. And so there were many problems with the changes to the rules. But through it all, Reverend Warnock never gave up. He kept to his core values, pushing health care for the people of Georgia and the country, pushing the work we need to do to have people's back when it comes to the economy. And mostly, over 30% of voters who voted Democratic in this last election, and this is important, said they voted that way because of democracy. Donald Trump's shadow looming big time. Right before this election, he actually said he wanted to terminate portions of the Constitution. Georgians noticed last time they stood up, including moderate Republicans and independent, and I predict when all these votes are in, they're going to be doing it again, standing up for democracy.
So, Senator, I mean, such an interesting point that you're making about Trump. I think a lot of people tonight are wondering, is Georgia really kind of like a battleground state now in politics? But a big change for Democrats happened last week. we all saw you campaigning really hard in Iowa and New Hampshire, and that calendar for the primaries is changing. And now Georgia and Michigan are added to the calendar. Is Georgia making a case for itself as a real battleground? Do you think that that's real, or is it just a Trump effect?
No, I think it is a real battleground. We've seen changes in the South. We have North Carolina has a Democratic governor. We have seen changes all over the country.
Senator, we're going to interrupt you. I want to go to Jake for an announcement.
Excellent.
That's right. We can now make a projection in the final Senate election of the 2022 midterm elections. CNN projects the Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock will win re-election in the Georgia Senate runoff, defeating Republican challenger Herschel Walker. Warnock, who joined the Senate after a special election victory 2 years ago, is now poised to serve his first full 6-year term. Again, CNN is projecting Senator Raphael Warnock will be re-elected in the state of Georgia, a critical win for Democrats. This is what it means for the balance of power in the Senate. Democrats now have an outright majority of 51 Senate seats. This strengthens their control of the chamber. Republicans have 49 Senate seats. That's one less, one fewer than they have now. Let's check in with our correspondents covering the candidates. Eva McKend is with Senator Raphael Warnock. And Eva McKend, I see behind you people celebrating that CNN has projected Raphael Warnock will be reelected to his first full 6-year term, Eva.
Yes, Jake, obviously it's exuberant in here tonight, and this is what Democrats have been telling me all evening, that this really solidifies Georgia as a true battleground state. You know, Democrats fought hard in the final hour to get that Saturday voting. They're indicating to me that they think that that was really crucial as well in ushering in this victory tonight. But this still shows that Democrats are still in play in this state. You know, they won no other statewide races during the general election. The governor's race on down, but tonight they have a victory. Jake?
A big victory, a huge big victory for Democrats. And Dana Bash, in the midterm elections, not only did Democrats not lose any Senate seats, they actually picked one up.
It is really remarkable when you see the map, and you know this, Senator, because you were quite literally all over the map campaigning for and with your colleagues and those who wanted to be in the Senate, like John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. Given every headwind that Democrats have had, you're now one up from where you were before.
Yeah, could I just celebrate for one moment? Pretty cool. I came on the set, we were 800 votes behind, and suddenly here we are. And this is what we thought was going to happen. And again, democracy on the ballot, the fact that Raphael Warnock and so many of our candidates were high quality, had the back of the people of this country, and then finally, no one wants their freedoms taken away. And the Dobbs decision and what we saw out of that with moderate Republicans and independents joining Democrats to say, wait a minute, reproductive freedom means something to me. All of those issues were on the ballot in Georgia, and Raphael Warnock never wavered, and I am so happy for him today and for the Senate that we're going to have him back. He's a force.
So you had raised a lot of concerns about Georgia, the election laws that had been put in place there. You and other Democrats had as well, suggesting that there's possible Jim Crow type legislation that was enacted in the state. We're seeing about 3.3 million voters, according to election officials, showed up today. Was there any evidence that those fears were borne out that you and other Democrats raised over the last year?
We don't know what the totals would have been if it would have been easier for people to vote. And what we are seeing across the country, remember they were trying to ban Saturday voting right before the election. Who does that? Usually when parties lose an election, like what happened with Trump and a number of their candidates in the midterms, they step back and say, what should we do about changing our policies or their candidates? What they've been saying is, let's change the voters. Let's make it harder for people to vote. And Georgians respond to that. They don't like that.
Yeah, and meantime, we should just actually sort of mark the moment. It's a pretty cool shot right there, the picture that we're seeing from Warnock headquarters, because this is it's a re-election, but it's actually his first full term. He's run The last
This is
2
the
years,
fourth-
twice.
This is the fifth time he's
Yes.
been
Oh, this is the fifth time,
on the
you're right.
ballot in 2 years. 2 points about this. Obviously, Democrats really, as Senator Klobuchar knows, worked their butts off in the state of Georgia, going back even before 2020. This has been a many years-long effort to create a ground game where one really did not exist at the statewide level in the state. But it is also a catastrophic failure for Republicans to lose 2 Senate seats in a red state where they could have had a fighting chance because of some really key missteps and failures, frankly, to acknowledge what was happening and respond to it. When Trump basically depressed his own vote, that really sealed the deal back in 2020 and set up a chain of events that has led us to this moment. For the next 4 years at least, Georgia is going to have 2 Democratic senators, and that's going to give Democrats, for a little while longer, a real opportunity to lock in some of these gains that they've been working on for all of these years. And it's going to be that much harder the next time around for Republicans to try to claw this back. I think that this was a key moment for them, and they missed their shot.
Well, they missed their shot. And Anderson, I'm sure you're going to talk about this with your panel. It was Donald Trump and his influence in a very negative way in Georgia that set off that chain of events that really hurt them there.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, Van Jones, it is extraordinary to see this turn of events.
Oh, it feels good. It feels good. Georgia. This is Georgia. This is Georgia. That the blood of martyrs is still in the soil in that state. People that were lynched, people were beaten, people were enslaved in that state. The idea that not once, not twice, 5 times you had someone like Warnock be able to be a senator. 6 years, and he's going to be there for 6 years. It's a very, very big deal. And you got to thank the grassroots. You got to thank Color of Change. You got to thank Black Voters Matter. You got to thank the Working Families Party. You got grassroots groups who went out there and fought hard. And by the way, you got to thank Stacey Abrams, because it was Stacey Abrams that made that entire thing even possible. This was beyond our ability to imagine before Stacey Abrams. Sometimes your candidacy loses, but your cause wins. So congratulations to Obama for being there, and also thank you, Donald Trump, for giving us this opportunity to make even more history.
I mean, I think Georgia, after this midterm, after what happened in 2020, may be remembered as the state that finally broke Donald Trump. Losing Georgia in the presidential election, losing this Senate race, this is not a state Republicans ought to be losing. And so when we go through this Republican primary, we need to think about the state of Georgia. It's going to be a swing state in 2024. And if we go down this road again, I suspect we're going to get the same result. I think Brian Kemp does stand out for me, despite the Democrats, and congratulations to Senator Warnock. I do think Kemp had a good cycle here and did what he needed to do to show the Republicans that he wants to be a team player. And also the Georgia elections officials and the people who wrote the Georgia voting laws. This was called Jim Crow 2.0 by Joe Biden and others. And everybody voted, good turnout, good election, nothing bad happened. Governor Duncan, all the Republicans down there who took all the grief for that, I think it should be said, this worked swimmingly in Georgia, even though Republicans didn't get a good outcome, the election system.
Well, Jeff Duncan, let me ask you, I mean, you think this could be good for the Republican Party, or necessary? This is a necessary step.
Yeah, let me qualify my answer by saying if you're a Republican, you're disappointed, and the only way to explain this is candidate quality, right? That's the only way to explain what's a 9+ point delta between Brian Kemp's margin and where it looks like Herschel Walker's going to finish this up at. So candidate quality does matter. Look, we've got a lot of work to do. I think Americans wake up all over this country worried about 2 things. The direction of Republicans wake up worried about 2 things. Who's going to take the lead in the party, and what's the economy going to do? People are going to be scared to death tomorrow to lose their job, and they don't know where the Republican Party's headed. We need a leader to show up big time. We need a once-in-a-generation leader to show up that actually understands conservatism, understands the values and the outcomes of making conservative decisions, and truly challenge Joe Biden in 24. If we don't take our medicine here, it's our fault.
I was just emailing with a Republican strategist who was a Walker supporter. And here's what he said. Kemp's ground game with McConnell's money nearly saved what Donald Trump ruined. And he said that every Republican statewide won. What's the difference here? The difference was Donald Trump. And he said, you know, we have to get over this. We just have to get over this dependence. One other thing I want to note is that Ron Klain, the White House Chief of Staff, tonight tweeted that Biden becomes the first president since FDR in '34 to see every senator of his party who was up for re-election reelected.
Actually,
Oh, go ahead. Well, one, Scott, you know I'm going to come back on that.
It was for you.
Thank you. There still were long lines. People still had to wait 2 hours. That's still a form of voter suppression. Just because you win doesn't mean voter suppression doesn't exist. But I'm still excited tonight. And we get to have a senator who I got to meet 8 years ago who was working at Martin Luther King's church fighting for voting rights. And he's going to go back to the United States Capitol and keep fighting. To Van's point, you cannot underestimate the grassroots. It was a 10-year strategy to get Georgia to this point. It will be a battleground forever. The thing that I want Democrats to take note is Georgia doesn't have to be the only one. There are states with diverse populations across this country where people and voters are ignored every single day. And if we invest in organizers and we invest in these groups like Color of Change, like Black PAC, like the AAPI vote, which is the largest voting bloc that is growing in this country, Latino voters, young voters, and independents, we can have a good 24 because it's not just a once-in-a-lifetime leader that gets the economy. It's about getting the American people. And this election cycle, the American people said, I want to know about the economy. I want to know about my constitutional rights. I want to know about democracy. I want to know about education, and they were complex voters that we cannot take for granted anymore.
Well, congrats to you tonight. I just want to note that once again, Donald Trump cost my party Senate seats. I was advising these same Georgia runoffs in 2020 when he lost those seats by, touting the election lies when it was Perdue and Kelly Loeffler. Once again, he put his hand on the scale and put up a candidate who was highly unqualified, Herschel Walker, to be in the U.S. Senate. And so now we're in a position where we have to come around and realize we are losing under him. The fact that in Biden's economy, how poorly the country is doing, the fact that by and large voters, right, left, or center, say we're on the wrong trajectory, yet they're not voting for change. That since 1934, that they have not actually had a part incumbent not lose seats in the Senate. That is an indictment of the Republican Party. We need to wake up because we are losing the moment.
Can I just say something about voters here in this whole midterm election? We saw a lot of split tickets. Yeah. People were voting for candidates. They were not just voting up and down the line. They were taking a look at a candidate's character and experience and saying, I want this person, I'm going to vote for the Republican governor in New Hampshire.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a development in this country. There are a couple of states that are famous for it, Montana being one of them, but it doesn't happen all the time in this country. And now, I think this is a great development. People are paying attention because the stakes are so high.
We keep talking about candidate quality.
Yeah.
And we only talk about it on the Republican side, saying they have negative candidate quality. But I just want to say, Reverend Warnock is an extraordinary human being. He's recognizable in our community as somebody who was working hard for people when he wasn't famous, working hard for people when his name wasn't in lights, believing in these causes when they were not popular. And so he's somebody who, there's a resonance that he has with people. People believe him. And I don't want it to only be you had a bad guy on the Republican side. You had a good man on the Democratic side, and that's important.
And he didn't change.
He didn't change.
He could have dragged Herschel Walker through the end zone.
Through the mud.
Whatever.
What do you call it?
But he could have dragged him. There was so much material, but he was a man of character.
That part.
And said, I know who I am, and I'm going to run the race today. Now, I did.
I'm a negative ad.
They did run their fair share of negative ads.
Yeah.
I mean, 50, 60, $70 million in character smashing ads. So it wasn't a clean campaign.
It could have been a lot worse.
They did what they had to do. But I think on Van's point, one thing I learned about this entire election, people with personal brands, apart from somebody else, did well in both parties. Warnock had a brand apart from politics. But the Kemps and the DeWines and the DeSantises and the Abbotts and the Republican Party, they didn't depend on Donald Trump or some other person to define who they are. And I do think this ticket splitting, Gloria, there's something about being able to define and own who you are that people are responding to.
Right.
They don't want you to be a wholly owned subsidiary of some other person or thing. They just want you to be who you are. And Warnock, I think, got that right in this race. Walker got tagged with Trump, and the candidates in these Senate races that got tagged that way with Trump all across the board lost. And that's a big lesson for the next cycle.
Every Republican in this country ought to hold Donald Trump accountable for this. And I think the part that bothers me the most, and I've spent a lot of time trying to dissect this, is that Donald Trump, it's not out of ignorance or miscalculation. It's out of selfishness. He's not picking these candidates because he thinks it's good for the country or the party. He gave up caring about this country when he lied about the election. He cares about himself, and these candidates that he's picking are pawns. And he's playing a serious game, and he's costing us an economy. As a Republican, I'm watching a crumbling economy. I'm watching a foreign policy. I'm watching a border. These are things I care about for my future, my kids' future. That's why we're all in this game. And we need to hold Donald Trump accountable, and I hope sooner than later he's in the rearview mirror. We need to use this as a pivot point for us to move forward with a GOP 2.0, or call it what you want. We need a new direction that allows us to capitalize on the shortcomings.
And very well said, and I think that I just want to issue the word of caution that we have seen Donald Trump come back from the ashes many times. You know, he did poorly in these midterms, the insurrection, he comes back and is the leader of the party. It needs to be a wake-up moment. The way that you believe in Raphael Warnock, I want candidates on the Republican side that I believe in that way, and that is just not who we put up in some of these races. So it's time to have that moment of, are we going to keep losing with Donald Trump, or are we going to move on?
You know, the Trump strategy was that the waters would part for him after the midterm elections. And of course, just the opposite has happened.
Yeah.
Not to mention his legal problems, not to mention throwing aside the Constitution, et cetera, et cetera. If Republicans don't have the guts to separate, if not divorce, at this point, I mean Republicans in leadership roles, not rank and file, I mean people leading, then there's a problem. There's a good group of candidates out there, as you were talking about, Scott. The question is where the followers are going to be, and I think followers want to win. If they believe in what the Republican Party stands for, they want to win.
Party leaders, by the way, we've done this historically. Republican Party leaders need to come together and decide how much do we want to lose, or are we willing to band together? And by the way, not run 15 or 20 people in 2024. Put our money and our efforts behind a couple of people who can actually beat him.
But you're going to have to be honest with the voters. And you're going to have to say that Donald Trump lied to them. And that means that at times you lied to them too. And I don't know if many Republicans and leaders are going to actually want to do that.
Well, on the Democrats, we should just let that just hang. That was a mic drop.
There's a difference between want to and need to, right? People might not want to say that they made a mistake and they followed down a rabbit trail about an election fraud and conspiracy theories and, you know, all their different nuances in their states, but we need to. To heal and rebuild this party, we need to move past Donald Trump and call it for what it is. It was a mistake, and we need to move on.
But so many the prominent Republicans in the Senate who once opposed Donald Trump, sold their souls in order to curry favor.
And so,
how do they bounce back from that?
I mean, we've been talking about redemption and grace, and I believe in all of that, but this is still politics, right? And so people,
what does that have to do with redemption and grace?
I
want to talk about our party then.
I just don't think people are, the seas haven't parted, but they haven't also drowned Donald Trump. And it's because folks are not sure on where they want to fall. And the truth telling that is going to have to happen around why Donald Trump was able to get these type of candidates to win in primaries and why he was able to get a mob of people to come on January 6th requires some real honesty that I don't know exists in the Republican leadership. Maybe it does. I'm hopeful. For my country, I'm hopeful, but I haven't seen it yet.
I mean, he talked about terminating the Constitution a couple of days ago, and there's still a lot of...
I've lived through all these undulations, and you're right, he has come back. I'm telling you, in the last month, something has changed.
It does feel different.
Something has changed, and you've had a number of people in Washington, but you've got people out in the middle of the country saying, you know what, I'm glad he was there, I like what he did, I voted for the man, I knocked on doors, but I don't want to lose anymore, and I'm tired of carrying this guy's bags. And this has been one of the worst months of his political life. I'm telling you, something has changed, and that's what primaries are for. You're right, that's what primaries are for.
I want to just quickly go over to Jeff Zeleny at Herschel Walker headquarters. Are we going to hear from Walker tonight, Jeff?
We are, Anderson. I'm getting word that Herschel Walker is poised to address his crowd of supporters who are still gathering here. They've been told not to leave this arena here at the College Football Hall of Fame in downtown Atlanta. Certainly a calm air has gone throughout the room here that was a celebratory for really quite a lot of the evening as the lead was seesawing back and forth with Senator Raphael Warnock. But we are expecting Herschel Walker to speak here. I'm told he's been huddling with his advisors and his wife, Julie Blanchard, who's perhaps his closest advisor. Officials I'm speaking to believe he will offer a concession speech, but we certainly will see what he does here behind me here. He's not given any indication that he would not do that. Republicans certainly are talking here about how close this race was, and they do believe it was close because he made this a referendum on Joe Biden. Of course, there will be many recriminations about the type of candidate, the type of campaign he ran, the type of candidate he was. But for now, at least tonight, the final race of this election cycle is over, and one more handpicked candidate by former President Donald Trump has been defeated. So certainly that will be one of the ongoing lessons of this campaign. Even talking to some Republican supporters here, they believe that this was a very winnable race. Look at this very close margin here. They believe this was a race that Republicans could have and should have won. So look for many lessons and recriminations and finger pointing in the hours to come. But for now, at least tonight, we are expecting Herschel Walker to take the stage here. Of course, he rose to prominence in Georgia because of his football fame, and he will deliver perhaps his final speech of his political life here at the College Football Hall of Fame in Atlanta. Anderson.
All right. Jeff Zeleny, thanks. We'll check in back with you as we await Herschel Walker and also Raphael Warnock, Senator Warnock. Him likely speaking tonight. Let's go back to Jake in D.C. Jake.
Anderson, thanks so much. While we wait for possibly Herschel Walker and definitely re-elected Senator Raphael Warnock to speak, let's chat some more with our august panel, including, of course, Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat from the great state of Minnesota. Look, obviously, Raphael Warnock, Senator Warnock, ran almost a textbook campaign, and I don't want to take anything away from his victory because he did a lot. I have to ask, though, it really seems as though Donald Trump does you guys a favor by picking these candidates for the Republican primaries that are very deferential to him and very supported by the MAGA base, but just lose election after election when it comes to independent, middle-of-the-road, moderate Republican and Democratic voters, whether it's Mastriano and Oz in Pennsylvania, Masters and Kelly Ward in Arizona, and on and on and on. I know you don't want him to run for re-election, but like he's constantly doing Democrats favors by picking these candidates that can't win.
I guess I think of it a different way. I think of why can't the Republican Party say goodbye? Why can't the Republican Party stand up to him like Liz Cheney has done, like Adam Kinzinger has done, and at great political risk? In her case, he didn't run again. In her case, she got defeated. But they stood up to him, and I think more people are going to have to do that. And when more people do it, then they actually don't lose. But what's happened here is repeatedly they don't stand up to him. And look at what's happening. You are right. Some of the biggest vote getters in the country were actually people that maybe you didn't hear of. Steve Simon, Secretary of State candidate in Minnesota, who got the most in our state, was running against an election denier. Or Fontes in Arizona in Maricopa County, despite Mark Kelly's incredible victory and Katie Hobbs and the like, he did the best in that county. A lot of this has to do with Donald Trump. I agree. But at the same time, I love that we put up candidates that are the real deal. And the state saw through whatever political lens they had, or of course, everything everyone's been through with COVID and inflation all over the world. And they said, you know what? I believe Raphael Warnock is going to have my back, and he's going to help our country, and he's the right guy in terms of our democracy. And that we saw all over the country. Everyone had counted us out. We know this, including maybe a few pundits on this network had counted us out, but we never gave up.
I just wonder, I mean, just a question that I have. you know, in this state of Georgia, the coalition, the Democrats needed to win, you know, suburban women, moderates, independents, black voters, just voters of color in general. Just a couple of days ago, President Biden said the next nominee for the party, maybe it'll be him, maybe, you know, maybe it'll be someone else, but the next nominee of the party needs to be able to prove that they can win voters of color. I just wonder if you agree with that and if Georgia tonight makes that case very strongly.
Yeah, of course. And I think what you've seen in Georgia is the work of someone who didn't win this time, Stacey Abrams, in building a network and bringing people into the Democratic Party that hadn't voted before. And Raphael and John did the same thing around their state. So that is a big piece of it. But also we've seen across the country that bringing in independent voters, moderate Republicans, particularly on reproductive freedom, when the Republicans doubled down, so many of the people racing to the governor's offices and state capitals on the Republican side to see who could be the first one after the overturn of Roe v. Wade to permanently ban abortion in their states. That was part of this election, and not just in Georgia, but across the country. Democrats stood up for a woman's right to make her own decisions about her health care.
But you know, when you talk about coalitions and where the Democrats are versus the Republicans, we'll see where the demographics of this shake out if we get those numbers. But certainly we saw in the real election in November that this is a real example of Republicans doing well with mostly white voters who don't have a college education, and Democrats doing well with those who do have a college education. And because you have Georgia, which has not just the city, but the suburbs and exurbs.
I want to go to Atlanta right now, where Jeff Zeleny is at Herschel Walker's campaign headquarters. Jeff, I don't know what you're hearing from individuals there about whether or not Mr. Walker is going to come out and speak. Tell us what you're hearing about Herschel Walker's failure.
Jake, I am learning from a senior advisor to the Walker campaign that Herschel Walker will come and address the crowd here before him in just a few moments. And I'm told he will concede this race. I'm told he will concede the race to Senator Raphael Warnock. And it's a race that he described just last night at his final campaign rally as the greatest honor of his life. He said the Heisman Trophy here, of course, from Georgia. Other awards were big, but he said running for public office in his home state of Georgia was the biggest honor of his life. And tonight I'm told he will concede. Now, he has not been a big proponent of election denialism necessarily, but he has not necessarily pushed back on it either. And of course, he was recruited into this race by former President Donald Trump to run. But I'm told he has no appetite for continuing this. He has no appetite for going forward with this race. In fact, the crowd behind me here was watching on the screen on Fox News as they called this race, and just a hush went over the crowd and really not much reaction at all. So there is no sense here, at least, that this is going to go beyond this evening. Perhaps it will in the mind of some supporters who simply cannot accept election results. But Herschel Walker, at least for his part, I'm told will concede here shortly in Atlanta. Jake?
All right, Jeff Zeleny, thank you so much. So if that is in fact what happens, and I want to predicate that with an if, because Herschel Walker has been nothing if not unpredictable. If he does concede, then he will be just the latest in a string of election-denying candidates who support Donald Trump's election lies, who themselves have run, gotten the nominations because of Donald Trump, and then lost and have conceded.
Yeah.
There are a couple exceptions in Arizona, Kerry Lake and Mark Fincham. Both are out there doing their unhinged thing. But most of the election deniers that Trump picked, ran, lost, have actually conceded, which I think is an important thing.
Yeah, we have seen that. We saw that in Nevada. Adam Laxalt, who was the state attorney general who tried to push to overturn the election results, he conceded. We saw Mehmet Oz concede in Pennsylvania. Blake Masters also denied the election results in 2020. He conceded. Let's see if Herschel Walker decides to do that here. But, you know, this moment is going to just prompt such a significant amount of soul-searching among Republicans about exactly what they did wrong here and how to avoid this next time. Next time they'll have a more favorable map. They can certainly take back the Senate majority, but they could also fail again if they nominate candidates who are lackluster. These are races Republicans are just beating themselves up. They are races that they know they could have won. They left on the table, and now they're on a 51.
They didn't have a horrible map in 2022, this year, at all. I mean, they were convinced that they were going to take a seat in Nevada. They didn't. They thought that they would take a seat in Georgia. They didn't. And the list goes on and on. So you're right. I mean, the soul searching is already underway, right? Even before, because of all the other losses, in the fact that they didn't do as well as they thought in the House, and then other losses in the Senate. But the fact that, just to go back to the point that Jeff was making in his reporting and that you made, if he does concede, the fact that we're here where we praise somebody for conceding, which is the norm, is sad. But because that is where we are, and because he is a Trump-backed candidate in the state of Georgia, if he does, it is noteworthy.
It is a good thing that normal is winning in terms of the norms of our democracy coming back into fashion. And the reality is that the only person who thought they could get away with not conceding an election that they clearly lost was Donald Trump. That's the reality of it. He tried to make it a trend, but it was not a trend. And I think tonight, if Herschel Walker concedes, it will be really incredibly telling about how far this stuff really goes, which is, the answer is really not very far. The American public is pretty tired of this stuff. I mean, when we look back at the midterm election results, voters were so dissatisfied with the economy, so dissatisfied with both political parties, but also dissatisfied with the state of our politics. And they said so by rejecting some of the most extreme figures that were out there, who were running on things that were just not palatable to where the average American was. And Republicans right now, there's so many Republicans on Capitol Hill who are just shouting, please listen to that message. And it's still, I think, as we sit here, an open question whether or not the party writ large will, as we go into a presidential cycle and as we go into another midterm.
I'd like to say something about Herschel Walker. Yes, I agree with you 100%. He shouldn't get brownie points for doing a normal thing, for conceding, which is what adults do in elections. This is a guy who was not a good person. Herschel Walker, I mean, now that it's over, I think I can say this, conveyed to voters in Georgia that he regularly would impregnate all sorts of women and either pay for their abortions or abandon their children. Period. That's not how Christian Republicans voted for him is beyond me, and I suspect we're going to hear in the coming days that a lot of them didn't, or just didn't vote. Jeff Duncan, the lieutenant governor, said the other day, the Republican lieutenant governor, who is a serious Christian conservative, said he couldn't vote. He just went into the ballot. They went into the vote, and there was only one election. He went in there and didn't vote. The man, and I think he lost the election when his son, Christian Walker, did I think it was a TikTok video or an Instagram video talking about,
and he's responding right now too,
talking about how his father had abandoned him, and we know there were at least 3 other children like that Herschel Walker abandoned.
And can I just say, in the birthplace of the American civil rights movement, there's a reason that Raphael Warnock ended his campaign leaning into this idea that Herschel Walker was an insult to Georgia voters, but he was also talking directly to black voters who felt that by Republicans basically picking the most popular, most well-known name of a black Republican and putting them out there, that was an insult to black voters who expected more from their candidates. That was part of the pitch from the Warnock campaign at the end. And I think it matters because in Georgia, voting matters, especially to black voters who fought and bled and died for the right to be able to do it. And that's why I think you saw the turnout the way that it was, and the lines as long as they were, and the turnout among black voters for Democrats as high as it was.
Let's bring in Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, who's on our panel. And Jeff, I'm sorry I apologize, but as a father, I find it just so appalling to see somebody behave the way that Herschel Walker did to his kids, just abandoning them, not being part of their lives, and then running as a Christian, running as an observant man. But you tell us, you went into the voting booth and you didn't vote.
Well, I just want to make sure we clear the record. I walked in the line, stood there like everybody else did, and I knew exactly what I was going to do because nobody had earned my vote. I walked in, opened up the machine, saw 2 names. Neither one of them had earned my support. Hit print and walked the empty ballot up to the scanner and walked out of the booth. It was unfortunate. I wanted to get there. I'm a Republican. I've been a conservative my entire life. I've probably been a conservative a lot longer than Herschel Walker or Donald Trump combined. And so it matters to me, but it's certainly, this is part of the process, Jake. I didn't go in there lightheartedly. I didn't go in there to make a news story. I went in there to start making a difference and to be bold enough to be able to look forward instead of looking backwards. And if we're Republicans and we're serious about winning the White House and winning majorities, we're going to have to look forward instead of backwards.
So you weren't going to vote for Raphael Warnock because he is a progressive Democrat and you're a conservative Republican.
Absolutely.
Why didn't you vote for Herschel Walker?
Well, yeah, I've said this along the way. He didn't earn my respect or my vote throughout the process. I mean, was it the part that he actually lived in Texas and tried to call Georgia home? Is it the fact that he never articulated a single conservative policy position, not one single one? Was it that he took on the allegations about his personal behavior by calling everybody a liar? Or if you just add them all together, that's why I got to that point.
So obviously Governor Brian Kemp, who was overwhelmingly reelected in November on the same ticket where neither Warnock nor Walker were able to get 50%. Obviously, he did a lot to try to help bring Walker across the finish line. The message seemed to basically be a partisan message of we need Republicans representing us in the U.S. Senate. Did that bother you? Did you think Governor Kemp was wrong to do that?
No, Governor Kemp has earned the right to endorse anybody he wants to, and certainly Governor Kemp's why this race was as close as it is, right? I mean, it's going to be within a couple of points, and I think a major part of that is Brian Kemp. But I want Republicans all over the country to look at Brian Kemp and see what he's done and model their campaigns, model their political futures after what he did. He simply got up every day for a year and pointed to his record. He pointed to conservative policies like how we handled COVID, how we dealt with a growing economy.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. We'll come back to you, but here's Herschel Walker.
Thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And also I'm going to acknowledge my wife Julie because she's with me and she's been through a tough time. But I want to say that I want to thank all of you as well because we've had a tough journey, have we not? But one of the things I said is when they called the race, I said the numbers doesn't look like they're going to add up. But one of the things I want to tell all of you is you never stop dreaming. I don't want any of you to stop dreaming. I don't want any of you to stop believing in America. I want you to believe in America and continue to believe in the Constitution and believe in our elected officials most of all. Continue to pray for them because all the prayers you've given me, I felt those prayers. I want to thank all my team as well, Team Herschel, because they put up with a lot. I want to thank Team Herschel. Thank all my donors as well because you guys, without you, I couldn't have done what I've done. So I want to thank all of you as well because there's no excuses in life. And I'm not going to make any excuses now because we put up one heck of a fight. And I said, that's what we got to do because this is much bigger. This is much bigger than Herschel Walker. And I told someone this the other day. I said, you guys, I've done a lot of stuff. You talk about Heisman Trophy, you talk about all the athletic awards, business awards I won. But the best thing I've ever done in my whole entire life is run for the Senate seat right here. And the reason I'm going to say that is I got a chance to meet all you and to hear what you guys feel about this country. And I got a chance for you guys to tell me what you do feel about this country. I got a chance to go into your homes, got a chance that you invested in Herschel Walker. And I thank you. And I thank you so much. And as I said, we can't blame no one. Because I want you to continue to believe in this country, believe in our elected officials, and most of all, stay together. Don't let anyone separate you. Don't let anyone tell you that we can't, because I'm here to tell you we can. And I want to here to tell you we can. And as I said early on, God is good, and He's a good God all the time. He's a good God. So I want to say I'm never going to stop fighting for Georgia. I'm never going to stop fighting for you because you're my family. Because I always Oh, I'm a winner. Hey, we all winners, so we're all winners, and that's what I want to say. We're all winners, and I want to say God is a good God. God bless you guys, and let me tell you, stay together. Continue to believe in our elected official. Always, always cast your votes, no matter whatever is happening. Cast your vote for all that. And God we trust. I do. In God we trust. Continue to cast your vote. Never, never, never give up. All right? God bless you guys. Thank you, guys. Now, thank you.
Republican Senate candidate Herschel Walker conceding defeat, saying that his losing Senate campaign is the achievement he is most proud of. Conceding, which is significant for somebody who at one point was engaged in spreading Donald Trump's election lies. And in fact, Manu Raju, while we wait for the winner of the election, Raphael Warnock, to come out and give his celebration speech, we should note that after Donald Trump lost the state of Georgia, Herschel Walker was among those retweeting Donald Trump's election lies and attacking Brian Kemp and Secretary of State Raffensperger, two conservative Republicans who were resoundingly reelected last month.
Yeah, I mean, look, Herschel Walker would not be here if it were not for Donald Trump. He was a supporter of Donald Trump's during the 2020 election campaign. Herschel Walker lived in Texas. He was not even in Georgia. It wasn't because he wasn't going to run until Trump pushed him into the race and essentially got Republican base behind him, essentially led to Mitch McConnell endorsing him. There would have been a much different candidate, potentially a different result if it were not for Donald Trump. And that is one of the things that Republicans are just going to have to grapple with going forward. How do you deal with Donald Trump's hand-picked candidates? Because we have seen in race after race after race this cycle, they cost them key seats and the Senate majority.
And I mean, there are, not to put too fine a point on it, but there are a number of Democrats who were reelected or elected who were vulnerable. I'm from Pennsylvania. It was almost just a truism that if a Democrat was in the White House, a Republican would be elected governor and vice versa. And yet, Democrat Josh Shapiro is the new governor-elect because Donald Trump got involved, and there was a MAGA candidate named Doug Mastriano who was unelectable statewide, and it was over and over, Michigan, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, on and on.
Yeah, I mean, I think Arizona and Nevada are two case in points. Those were two top targets for Republicans, and Democrats won both of those races, and now they've won yet another Senate seat in the deep South. This is a real moment for Republicans to figure out how they are going to proceed forward, and it goes beyond Donald Trump at this point, because it's not just Trumpism, it's also a lot of Trump voters who are where Trump is and maybe even beyond that at a certain point. And that is what's pushing the party so far to the right that they're not able to get out of these primaries unscathed with a candidate who can really survive in a general election. Their primary process is a huge part of the problem here. It's making them vulnerable. It's making them unpalatable in the suburbs. It's making them unpalatable to a lot of these emerging, voters of color who are decisive in states like Nevada and Arizona and Georgia. These are big problems, and they're going to persist even beyond.
They couldn't get Jeff Duncan's vote.
Yeah.
The very conservative Christian lieutenant governor of Georgia went to vote, and Herschel Walker was such a horrible candidate he couldn't vote for. Well, let's go to where Jeff Duncan is. Anderson?
Jake, thanks so much. Jeff, what is the message for, I'm going to ask that, what is the message for the Democrats here and for Republicans? Jeff, what is the message for Republicans?
Well, one, I want to thank Herschel Walker for that concession speech. That was one of the classiest speeches I've heard from either Democrat or Republican, and I appreciate it, and things like that are going to help make this a better country as we continue to move forward. Look, it's a wake-up call for both parties, right? There's a vacuum of leadership of epic proportion. When I walk into a room to give a speech, I oftentimes say, raise your hand if you think the political system's broken, and everybody raises their hands. This is a wake-up call for America, right? Our problems are starting to mount, economic problems, international problems, border problems, you name it, we've got challenges. And so this country needs leadership. This is a pivot point for Republicans, my party. We need to pick up in a new direction. We need to pick new leaders that have a vision. And I think this is an important part of that step, unfortunately.
Just because Republicans are dumb doesn't make Democrats smart. And I do think it's important for us to look in the mirror. We're going to hear from one of the great leaders. I think we have some real leadership. We're going to hear from it tonight when he gives his victory speech, Reverend Warnock. But just because Republicans have done dumb stuff doesn't make Democrats smart. And there is a danger that we get too triumphalist about what just happened. He should have been beat by 50 points. He should have been beat by 80 points. The kind of campaign that he put on and the kind of character he showed, he shouldn't have been supported by anybody. And yet, you couldn't bring yourself to vote for Warnock, and people did bring themselves to vote for him. So I think Democrats have to look in the mirror. I think we got lucky, and we earned the luck by working hard and putting forward great people. So that's some earned luck in there. But I think going forward, had the tides gone differently, had you not had that abortion decision, had you not had some of these wackadoodle candidates from Donald Trump, and we were sitting in the penalty box, what would we be saying? We'd be saying some of this woke stuff has gone too far. We'd be saying, you know, some of our inability to really bring people in who are working class in a great way is not where it needs to be. So there are problems and faults and flaws in our party. I want to make sure that we fix those because 2024 is around the corner.
I have to say, I disagree with you a little bit.
Talk to me.
I think that both parties need to do an evaluation, and Democrats did get lucky in some instances. I also think, though, that Democrats wanted a fighter. They wanted candidates that were going to go out and be like, we're not going to be bullied by Donald Trump. We're not going to be bullied by insurrectionists. We're going to stand up for our democracy. We're going to try and get legislation passed, even if we can't get over the 60 vote threshold in the Senate. And then Joe Biden did take some action. I'm not going to lie, Dobbs was monumental in this election. Gun violence was monumental in this election, but it was talking about all of it. And I think that, you know, when Joe Biden told people on the campaign trail when we were on in 2020 and said, we're going to address student loan debt, we didn't solve the whole problem that we're going to take a step forward and you actually deliver on politics. That's what people want. When you make a promise, you keep it. And when politicians don't, that's why people feel like it's broken. And I think if Republicans, now that they have the House, if they go down this path with investigations and oversight and not delivering for the American people, I think we're going to be having a similar conversation in 2024 if Dems keep the word that they ran on in this cycle.
Well, and I think you hit on something very important, and the Lieutenant Governor did as well, which is the fact that we're even commending a candidate for conceding at a loss shows how far the GOP has gotten outside of the mainstream. So you had two firm election deniers in Doug Mastriano and in Herschel Walker, who showed more integrity, more honesty, and more class than the former president did by acknowledging reality and the truth that they lost the election. All right, great, step in the right direction. But to your point, we now have a split government, which I actually think is a good thing for democracy and for the country. But it's a moment for House Republicans to recognize this was not a mandate for Republicans. No. We squeaked by just by a hair that Kevin McCarthy, whoever the leader ends up being, the speaker ends up being. This is a moment to govern and to actually deliver and to do things like try to lower gas prices, try to, bring down bills for average Americans, secure the border. And I worry that that lesson's not going to be heard because they're still going to be so held hostage to Trump.
And I'm going to agree with Van because I don't think it was a mandate for Democrats either. I think Democrats won a lot of races in a very close way because they had better candidates. They worked so hard, as you guys are talking about. But as you look into the future, they've got 20-plus candidates. What is it, up in 2024, they have 21 Democratic seats up. And they got to get their act together, too, if they want to keep control of the Senate. We don't know if Joe Biden's going to run or not. I mean, my guess now is that he's going to run, but who is he going to run against? And what you're talking about, Van, is the Democratic Party sort of overdoing it and overstepping it, and maybe they need to take a look and kind of rejigger and move back to the center, which is what Joe Biden ran and won on in the first place. And people say, he overinterpreted his mandate and he governed as a liberal.
We're going to keep the conversation going. I just want to point out Senator Raphael Warnock is now on stage. We're obviously going to bring you his comments live, but we'll continue until he...
But I think people voted for candidates because they wanted to believe what they were saying and agree with them and wanted them to do something.
I think there's plenty of worry for both parties. I think both parties need new leadership in 2024. I think the American people are tired of these parties backing in to these races. They're looking to affirmatively be led. They don't get it out of Trump. I don't really think they're getting it out of Biden. New leadership is needed and the American people want it.
Well, hello, everybody. Y'all settle down now. Settle down. Thank you, Georgia. Thank you. I love you too. All right, y'all settle down. I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, and to God be the glory. For the great things that God has done. And after a hard-fought campaign, or should I say campaigns, it is my honor to utter the four most powerful words ever spoken in a democracy. The people have spoken. I often say that a vote is a kind of prayer for the world we desire for ourselves and for our children. Voting is faith put into action. And Georgia, you have been praying with your lips and your legs. With your hands and your feet, your heads and your hearts. You have put in the hard work, and here we are standing together. I want to say thank you. And I want to say thank you to my mother, who is here tonight. You'll see her in a little while. But she grew up in the 1950s in Waycross, Georgia, picking somebody else's cotton and somebody else's tobacco. But tonight, she helped pick her youngest son to be a United States Senator. My dad has long passed into the light, but he is still very much with us. I watched my dad, a pastor and a small businessman, take care of his family by working really hard with his hands and using his brain. And he picked up old junk cars and loaded them on the back of a rig that the mechanisms of which he designed himself, one on top of the other. And that's how he took care of his family. But on Sunday morning, the man who lifted broken cars lifted broken people. And convinced them of their value. I would not be here were it not for them. I am a proud son of Savannah, Georgia, a coastal city known for its verdant town squares and its cobblestone streets, tall, majestic oak trees, dripping with Spanish moss, bend and beckon the love of history and horticulture to this city by the sea. My roots, like the roots of those oak trees, go deep down into the soil of Savannah and Waycross and Scriven County and Burke County. I am Georgia. I am an example and an iteration of its history, of its pain and its promise, of the brutality and the possibility. But because this is America, and because we always have a path to make our country greater against unspeakable odds, here we stand together. Thank you, Georgia. I want to thank my mother and my late father. I want to thank my siblings who are here. I'm one of 12 in my family. Clearly, my folks read the Bible, be fruitful and multiply. Our family was short on money, but long on love, long on faith. And I want to thank my two darling children, Chloe and Caleb, whose brilliance and whose eyes inspired me to work for all of our children. Georgia, I don't want you to miss what you've done. In a moment in which there were folk trying to divide our country, and those forces are very much at work right now, Georgia did an amazing thing. In 2021, it sent its first African-American senator and its first Jewish senator to the United States Senate in one fell swoop. And you have done it again. Thank you, Georgia. Now, there are those who will look at the outcome of this race and say that, yes, you're right, we won. But there are those who would look at the outcome of this race and say that there's no voter suppression in Georgia. Let me be clear. Just because people endured long lines that wrapped around buildings, some blocks long, just because they endured the rain and the cold and all kinds of tricks in order to vote doesn't mean that voter suppression does not exist. It simply means that you, the people, have decided that your voices will not be silenced. Let us not forget that when we entered this runoff, a vestige of the ugly side of our complicated American story, state officials said that we couldn't vote on Saturday. But we sued them and we won. And the people once again rose up in a multiracial, multi-religious coalition of conscience. You endured the rain, you endured the long lines, and you voted, and you did it because you believe, as I do, that democracy is the political enactment of a spiritual idea. This notion that each of us has within us a spark of the divine, that we were created in the imago Dei, in the image of God. And if you're not given to that kind of religious language, that's fine. Our tent is big. Simply put it this way, each of us has value. And if we have value, we ought to have a voice. And the way to have a voice is to have a vote to determine the direction of your country and your destiny within it. And so we stand here tonight on broad shoulders. Our ballot is a bloodstained ballot. We stand here on the shoulders of the martyrs, Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, 2 Jews and an African American who lost their lives fighting for that great American right to vote. Viola Luiso and James Reed, a white sister and a white brother who also lost their lives. Fannie Lou Hamer, that indomitable Mississippi sharecropper. And my parishioner, God bless his memory, John Lewis, who one day crossed a bridge knowing that there was danger on the other side, and yet he crossed that bridge while building a bridge for the future. And now it is on us, the latest generation of Americans and of Georgians, to keep building that bridge, to keep walking that long walk, pushing the nation towards our ideals. And so, Georgia, this is my promise to you. The work that we must do is difficult. The issues are not simple, they're complex. But here's my promise to you: I will walk with you even as I work for you. Because here is what I've learned as a pastor. You can't lead the people unless you love the people. You can't love the people unless you know the people, and you can't know the people unless you walk among the people. You cannot serve me if you cannot see me. And so during these difficult days, even as I work on specific public policy proposals and I offer bills and work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to get those bills passed, I just want you to know that I see you. I see you parents as you're trying to put your kids through college and through community college and technical college. I see you students as you're trying to make a way out of no way. I see you essential workers fighting for a livable wage to participate in the prosperity that you create for others. Farmers who are an answer to our most basic prayer, give us this day our daily bread, and yet they struggle to hold on to the farm. Farmers, I see you, and I'm here with you. And together we can work through all of these issues. And I want all of Georgia to know whether you voted for me or not. I get it. But I want all of Georgia to know, whether you voted for me or not, that every single day I am going to keep working for you. I'm proud of the bipartisan work I've done, and I intend to do more because I actually believe that at the end of the day, we are all Americans. I believe in that American covenant. E pluribus unum. And it is that covenant that drives me to work to lower costs, to lower the cost of prescription drugs, to create jobs all across our state, to address the issue of criminal justice reform. Because I believe that you can have justice and safety at the same time. So thank you for this high honor. After a hard-fought campaign, you got me for 6 more years. So let me quickly do a couple of things. I want to thank my amazing campaign staff. Led by
Listen to Raphael Warnock, senator, re-elected tonight, as CNN has projected, in the runoff against Herschel Walker. Van Jones, you can certainly see his influence as a preacher, the cadences with which he speaks.
Yeah, beautiful. And, you know, I was noticing it's hard not to smile. Even my Republican colleagues, when his presence, you know, it just brings a smile. You can tell this is a good man. And he means what he says. And I thought that frame, I see you. And he started talking to all the people who just don't feel seen, the people who work hard every day, the people who don't have very much. I think it's a blessing. I was just happy to see something kind on the air. We have so many shootings and Nazis and stuff like that. Just to let somebody who came up out of the community, who's worked so hard, who's been there for us, to go through not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 elections in 2 years for 1 job. This brother wants that job. He wants that job. And I think you can feel that he's going to do a good job.
I think we heard 2 good speeches tonight, and not grievance-filled, and talking about bipartisanship and working across the aisle, and together we can work through these issues. I thought it was kind of remarkable and refreshing.
Jeff, what did you think?
Well, one, congratulate Senator Warnock. I can't imagine how tired he is. And to your point, I mean, the guy's been campaigning for what feels like a decade. I'm sure he's going to sleep well tonight. But, you know, he's got his work cut out for him. You know, I couldn't help be reminded, listening to that speech, he could have made it easier on himself, too. If he would have had more of a Joe Manchin voting record along the way, instead of just being 100% or 96 or 98%, that would have been a closer fit to Georgia. But he won the race, and congratulations to him. And we've got our work cut out as Republicans. We'll have another Senate seat on the table in 4 years.
Ashley?
You know, listening to his speech, and honestly listening to Herschel Walker's speech, you might not know which party they were from tonight. And that was refreshing. I'm in the business of building coalitions, and I really appreciated what Senator Warnock said tonight about building bridges. He feels like not a transition candidate, but the next generation for our party. He talked about his parishioner, John Lewis. This man preaches at Martin Luther King's church in a time when I wasn't even thought of. And to see what is possible in this country, it gives me hope as a older millennial, the next generation, for him to speak to them, to speak to working class, to talking about how his mother picked cotton. In this country, we often think about how far we have come, but our history is very recent. And if we have leaders like Warnock in office who are willing to build bridges, who are willing to be bipartisan, who are willing to represent all of Georgia, which he has promised to do, it gives me hope for this country. And nights like tonight, I want to bottle up and remember, because it won't always be this moment of feeling. And so we need to remember nights like this, because this is what America's about.
I thought it was so important that he mentioned the martyrs by name.
By name.
When we say this is Georgia, you know, for us, you know what that means. You know that people literally were murdered, people were literally beaten, people were literally killed, black and white, just to have a black person to be able to vote, let alone go to the U.S. Senate, and that he gave the honor to Fannie Lou Hamer. He gave honor to John Lewis.
We're looking at his mom being brought.
And to his mother, who you just so beautifully mentioned. I just think it's important because we assume that everybody knows when we say this is Georgia. He made sure that everybody knew. There are martyrs that gave their lives for this moment.
And I think it was important that he mentioned bipartisanship in this speech tonight. He does have a strong voting record of being with President Biden pretty consistently, but he's got his work cut out for him. The job begins tomorrow, well, it begins in January in the Senate, and there are major must-pass bills, and Democrats have a very slim majority. So it is going to require, for him to be a successful senator who's going to represent the whole state of Georgia, he's going to need to reach across the aisle, and I hope that he means that.
You know, one thing about tonight and this entire midterm, pretty well-run election across the board. Very few problems. It did take a long time to count some votes out west, and we really only had one state where somebody's, kind of throwing a fit about a clear outcome. There were a lot of predictions that we were going to have another 2020-style meltdown. That did not happen. And so for all the county clerks and precinct workers and everybody else who runs elections in America, which I'm a strong supporter of the diffused election system we have. All these people that some of them are volunteers or get very low pay and they take these jobs, they are in the crosshairs of a lot of controversy, but we had a pretty well-run election. And tonight, we had a gracious winner, we had a gracious loser. If you think that American democracy was damaged somehow after 2020 and you were wondering what was going to happen here, I would think no matter what party you're in, this whole election should have given you some heart that when push comes to shoves, America will get it right. The American people will get it right, and we did in this midterm.
Even some of the most extreme candidates on the right who were running, who lost. I mean, Arizona perhaps the outlier on this, but Mastriano and others conceded.
Absolutely, and they taught the Republican Party a lesson. They taught Donald Trump a lesson, and you just got to hope the momentum of respecting the outcomes of democratic elections will continue.
Stay with us for more reaction to Senator Warnock's re-election victory, what it means for both parties with the 2024 presidential race around the corner. Our special coverage continues right after this.
A critical and hard-fought victory for Democrats tonight. CNN projecting that Senator Raphael Warnock has been re-elected in Georgia, defeating his Republican challenger, football star Herschel Walker, after a close and whiplash-inducing runoff election that saw the lead change multiple times as votes came in this evening. This means Democrats are getting what they wanted, an outright Senate majority of 51 seats. That will strengthen their control of the chamber over the next 2 years. Republicans will lose a seat. They will have 49 in the next Senate. Their hopes of keeping the Senate evenly divided dashed. Herschel Walker's loss is clearly a huge blow to Republicans, perhaps especially to Donald Trump. Kristen Holmes has more on that. Kristen, what are you hearing from inside the Republican Party?
Well, I would say certainly, especially to Donald Trump. We've already started hearing Republicans, some of them in more veiled language, not using Trump's name directly, saying it is time to reevaluate the party. It is time that this should be a moment of reckoning. Others are blaming Trump outright. Prominent Iowa Republican Bob Vanderplaats, who once supported Trump, tweeted that conservatives are tired of losing, that 2024 should be a time to reevaluate, and that they need to choose well. The big question here now for those around Trump is whether or not he can actually hold on to his base. I spoke to one former Trump advisor who said that there is still a large portion of the Republican base who only cares about Donald Trump, but some in his orbit just aren't so sure. And Jake, I'm going to say what I said at the beginning of the night and repeat it again now. Donald Trump needed Herschel Walker to win. He needed him to win after those lackluster midterm results, after a number of candidates that he had put forward fizzled or flopped in the midterms, and after his own campaign seems to be stalled. He now has even less momentum going into his 2024 cycle after he announced his third presidential bid than he did when he announced after those midterms, Jake.
All right, Kristen Holmes, thanks so much. And let's talk about this with our panel. It's interesting. Herschel Walker said something in his concession speech that maybe some of us missed, but in retrospect, when you think about Donald Trump, might have been significant. Let's play that if we can.
One of the things I said is when they called the race, I said the numbers doesn't look like they're going to add up. But one of the things I want to tell all of you is you never stop dreaming. I don't want any of you to stop dreaming. I don't want any of you to stop believing in America. I want you to believe in America and continue to believe in the Constitution and believe in our elected officials most of all.
Now, I don't think that Herschel Walker meant this, but when he invoked believe in the Constitution, a couple days after Donald Trump suggested that provisions in the Constitution be terminated so that he could be installed as president, it's just an interesting contrast. I don't think Herschel Walker meant that as a slam on Donald Trump, but the fact that Donald Trump is now not only a loser when it comes to his own elections and when it comes to people that he plucks to win their primaries that go on to lose in the general, he's also, by definition, anti-Constitution.
I mean, well, first of all, I'm with you. I'm not sure that Herschel Walker meant this as a diss to Trump, but I think a lot of Republicans are going to be put in a pretty tough spot when they have to defend some of this stuff, especially, I think this last thing, it's actually kind of incredible that it would take Trump writing that the Constitution should be terminated and not when he actually incited a riot on January 6th to stop the peaceful transfer of power. The act wasn't enough, but the words apparently were enough for Republicans to do a double take and say, okay, maybe this is not what we want for the nominee of our party, but this is a weak moment for Trump. It was it was that tweet, his meetings with anti-Semites and racists, and also all of these losses that are all adding.
And yet, look at what we are going to be seeing and are already seeing, what you're running around covering every single day on the Hill, which is the race for the speakership on the Republican side, and Kevin McCarthy trying to walk this line because he has been very robustly supportive of Donald Trump over the past many years, but even after the insurrection. And it's because of what he sees in his own caucus, that the House Republican caucus, those who are from those ruby red states, and there are so many ruby red districts, they haven't moved past Donald Trump.
No question. And that's the real divide within the Republican Party. You're seeing the House Republicans still dominated by so many of those Trump allies because of the fact that they come from these, they have to win primaries in these very red districts, and Senate Republicans who have a much more diverse constituency who want to get away from Donald Trump. I can tell you, just talking to Senate Republicans since the dinner with anti-Semites, since the termination of the Constitution Post, and in the aftermath of losing the Senate in November, losing it now, they're tired of it. They want to move on. Now, as Mitt Romney told me yesterday, he said, yeah, it doesn't really matter what the elected officials say. It matters what the base says. That's really the bigger issue here. But we could expect more elected officials to run away from Trump, but will it matter?
And I heard recently from a Republican, a very senior Republican, who was basically saying, Trump hasn't really demonstrated that he really actually wants to launch a serious campaign for the presidency. And that might be true, but I think it's going to take more than wishful thinking for Trump to actually be defeated. Republicans have to actually do something. He's not just going to kind of fade into the background. That's just not really his MO.
It is the first time since 1934 that the incumbent party picked up governor's seats and picked up a Senate seat. And Democrats did a good job. I don't want to take away from that, but it is because, in no small part, of Donald Trump being the primary force in the Republican Party. That is one of the reasons why Democrats had another great election night. Coming up next, what does the Warnock win mean for President Biden and political battles ahead? Stay with us. And welcome back to election night in America. It's over, guys. President Biden is now weighing in on the re-election of Senator Raphael Warnock, the Democrat in the Georgia runoff. President Biden posting this tweet a short while ago saying he just phoned Senator Warnock to congratulate him. He added, quote, "Tonight, Georgia voters stood up for our democracy, rejected ultra-MAGA-ism, and most importantly, sent a good man back to the Senate. Here's to 6 more years." And I have to say that I think while, you know, the re-election of Raphael Warnock bodes ill, or in a normal world would bode ill for Donald Trump, this, to me, is yet more evidence that there's no question, although this is not a fact, this is my projection, my guess, that Joe Biden will not see a victory for him in the election results and want to run for re-election. I think the fact that this is the first time since 1934 that the president's incumbent party picked up governor's seat, 2 governor seats, and a Senate seat, not to mention the red wave that really never happened. Joe Biden is going to view that as a victory for him as well, a vote of confidence.
I mean, I think it is a victory for Joe Biden. I mean, this was not a good environment for an incumbent president and his party, and they did way better than a lot of people expected, including a lot of Democrats. Once again, the Biden White House is looking at the situation and they're saying, everyone consistently underestimates us. They underestimated us in the 2020 Democratic primaries. They did it again when it comes to the legislative agenda, which was robust and bipartisan on a lot of different fronts. And then they did it again in the midterm elections. And I think that Biden personally, based on talking to people close to him, he believes that he can beat Trump again. He is very confident about that. And so as we wait for that decision, everything that I have heard from people around Biden is that he has no question in his own mind about whether he can.
Yeah, they're planning on it. They're planning on it right now. And I guess any president or anybody in this situation would plan on it until and unless they're not going to do it. I mean, let's just be honest. Any president or any politician with this record in a midterm, there would be no question about them running again if they weren't 80 years old.
Right.
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
that's it.
Of course.
I mean, but we just say it out loud.
I mean, and look, they think that he can beat Donald Trump, but what about Ron DeSantis? What about a younger candidate? That's what sparks.
What about Brian Kemp?
Yeah, exactly. That sparks a lot of fears among Democrats that he may not be able to withstand the rigors of a campaign if the country does want someone new. I mean, yes, they exceeded expectations, no doubt about it. But Biden also avoided some of these key states in the midterms. Barack Obama was the one stumping in Georgia in the final days, not Joe Biden. That was and all throughout the campaign cycle. That's what happened here. They knew where to go and where not to.
Yeah, but we remember when Barack Obama was president, he was not exactly welcome.
Also avoiding the battle.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens when you're a sitting president underwater.
Can I just give one more update on the Donald Trump thing, because we're talking about, is the Republican Party ever going to learn? Ronna McDaniel, the RNC chair, went on Fox and said, we need our voters to vote early. She's like, we're learning the lesson of the last years. We need our voters to vote early. There were many in 2020 saying, don't vote by mail, don't vote early. Obviously, she meant Donald Trump, and yet, of course, the RNC spokesman just issued a statement saying, no, we weren't talking about Donald Trump. He supports early voting, which, of course, he does not. So there's just an idea of like where the party's going on that whole thing. Casey Hunt and John Vaz are standing by with more election night coverage. Stay tuned. They'll be right here.